The Board of Trustees on June 7, 2021. Just like to welcome everybody to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 board meeting. I would just ask if gentlemen, I'm not that sure that I see any, would remove their hats, and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, I'll introduce all of our participants this evening. To my far right is our board clerk, Lynn Town. To my immediate right is our superintendent, Steve Cook. To my immediate left is Vice Chair Rebecca Smith. To her left, Casey Morrisroe, board member. To his left, Lisa May, board member, and to her left, Tambra Pickford, board member, and I am Jennifer Brumley, chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board by email at trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through the clerk. All right, so I believe we are going to have a motion to amend our agenda. We would like to make sure, because this can be a long evening, and I know we know folks are here for a particular issue tonight. So is there a motion to amend the agenda to move that topic up?
So moved. Second.
Do we have a motion to which one you want to move and to where?
After consent, is that what we're looking at doing? Is that correct? Okay, so I'll make a motion to move item G from the action items up to after the consent agenda items.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, and now I need a motion to approve the amended agenda. I'll do that when I get to that on the agenda item. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, sorry, I keep breathing to that funny. My apologies if it's annoying out there. Okay, so with that amended agenda, we will start into our regular agenda, which is first board recognition, and I will turn it over to Dr. Cook.
So I'm going to ask Amy Wise to come up here with me. Yeah. So you don't want to talk, is what I hear. Is that right? Are you going to be willing when I hand you the mic?
They called me when I was teaching children today and said, "Do you want to talk?" I'm like, "I'm talking right now." No.
Okay, so let me read some really cool stuff about you first, and then I'll give you the mic after we've got you a little bit, okay?
Oh.
All right, so this is one of the highlights of being a superintendent. This is one of the funnest parts of the job. So recently we had the honor of announcing our Teacher of the Year in the district, Ms. Amy Wise. Amy teaches at Atlas Elementary School. She taught 4th grade this year. She's taught in our district since 1986.
Started when I was 12.
34 years teaching here in Title I schools. Since then, she has taught over 800 students. She is recognized as an Idaho Master Teacher in 2019 from the State Board of Education. Active with Opening Books, Opening Doors Reading Initiative from 2017 through 2019. I got a lot here, so get comfy. Completed PEBC training, the Thinking Institute sessions in both 2016 and 2020. 8-time recipient of the Classroom Grant from Excel Foundations. Received her master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the University of Idaho. She is one of our leaders in professional development of the Teacher Leader Academy. She's developed curriculum for the district. She's mentored student teachers for the district, and she's worked on every committee that we've ever asked her to serve on. Her principal, Heather Summers, said the following: "She is a lifelong, passionate learner who publicly shares her craft with other teachers, coaches, and trainers. She also described Amy as a risk taker and one who goes above and beyond with energy, dedication, determination, and most importantly, with the needs of the student staff as her primary focus. She is never hesitant to take on tough situations while providing and advocating support for the families of her students. She is readily accessible and is seen as an expert in intervention, workshop, discourse, planning, and community." That's education talk for she's a rock star. "She provides student agency while holding all learners to a high level of understanding." I'm going to now quote Amy on her application that she had to fill out because she wasn't going to do this, and I'm going to probably take what she wanted to say. "Parents share with me the most precious thing in their life, and I see it as an honor of the responsibility that comes with educating all the children in my care. We want an excellent life for them, so we work together to provide that. Relationships are crucial. I love the kids in my room, and I want them to know that I love them." I am so proud to present to you the District Teacher of the Year, Miss Amy Wise. So will you say something to us?
Sure. Well, it's, I don't know if all that's true or not, but it has been a long time since I've been teaching, and it has felt like a hot minute, and then it has felt like a really long time sometimes, which I'm sure every parent has that same feeling. I really do believe that every child is precious and that every child can learn and grow. And I have felt that way my whole professional career. And I've worked alongside other educators that feel the same exact way, that work hard every day to make sure that kids are cared for and loved, and that they grow, and that they are becoming wonderful little humans, and they grow up into wonderful big humans. And that's really important to me. I have been very blessed to have this as my career. I've been very blessed to work with the very best, and Coeur d'Alene is an excellent district. They have always, always, always cared for children and put that first in everything that they do. And I can say that because I have 5 children that have been in this district, one that is still here. And I just hope and pray that all of the children in the world have the opportunity to learn and grow and be loved. And I feel very honored to receive this award, knowing that there are hundreds of other teachers in the district that could get this award too.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, you can sit down now. Thank you. And she couldn't make it tonight, but I also want to do a quick shout out to the district's Rookie Educator of the Year. It's Bree Barber. She's at the CDAE school. She taught 5th grade this year and did a fantastic job. So just a quick shout out to both Amy and Bree as our representatives for Teacher of the Year competition this year. So thank you. And I think now we're turning over to Tamra for the CEP teachers. Yep.
Yes, I am up. And before I start, I just wanted to thank the Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership for sponsoring these final awards, and for the many years of support and recognition of our incredible teachers we have here in Coeur d'Alene School District. It's been an amazing partnership that we've been so grateful to have. So thank you to CEP, and I'm going to hopefully read everybody's name properly that goes across as they do the slideshow. For Teachers of the Month for September and October is Heather Izzard from Skyway, Jacqueline Watson from Bora, and Letha Morgan from Fernan. And for November and December, we have Tammy Franzik from Dalton Elementary and Bree Barber, who was our Rookie Teacher of the Year from eSchool. And for January and February, we have Meg Westrup from Hayden Meadows, Larissa Rollins from Bryan, and Carissa Wise from Nexa. And March and April is Wendy Gabbert from Ramsey, Kathleen Hicks from Skyway. And May and June, we have Ashley Tinney from Sorensen, Mary Rose from our Coeur d'Alene Early Learning Center, and Katie Levitt from Winton. So please help me in honoring them and thanking our Teachers of the Month and our Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership.
Okay, thank you, Tamara and Dr. Cook. Board trustee comments. I have something on here, but do we have a board member that's going to talk about that tonight? Briefly? Between the two of you?
I think that was me, right? Lynn?
Okay.
Just real quickly, we want to say we're moving into negotiation session here shortly in the coming weeks. Not quite as quick as we typically do, but with all the kind of late changes with state funding and those sorts of things, it's going to be a little later start, probably not until July or later in June that we'll start that. But we look forward to getting that moving forward and hopefully wrapped up before the school year starts. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Morshrow. And next, I have 3 names on my list here, but I only see 2 representatives over there. I know we have Austin. Is it Ainsley? Okay. And Helena's not here tonight. Is that right? All right. So, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Thank you, Trustee Morshrow. I did skip number 5. We'll start with the high school student body reports first. Then I'll get to you guys. And first up tonight, we have Coeur d'Alene High School.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Cook, district administration, and valued community members. My name is Holly Hudson, and I'm the ASB president. With me tonight is ASB Vice President Mackenzie Mattis, ASB Secretary Alexi Wilson, Lillian Smith, Senior Class President, and our incoming ASB members, Maya Reitz, ASB President, Ellie Morrisrow, Vice President, Austin Smith, ASB Treasurer, and Gracie Schaubert, ASB Secretary. As a student body, we're so excited to finish off this great school year. We faced a lot of adversity, but still made it the best out of it. I know that next year is in great hands, so I'm so excited to see what it'll look like. So now I'd like to introduce ASB President Maya Reitz.
Hi, my name is Maya Reitz, and I'll be a senior next year. I'll be next year's ASB President. I'm just super excited to get to work for next year and make it the best it can be.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Mattis, the ASB Vice President. This past month, we had a very successful prom, our annual Mr. CHS competition, student council elections for next year, and we also had our play, Peter and Wendy. The month was also filled with lots of AP testing. Next, you'll be hearing from our next ASB Vice President, Ellie Morrisrow.
Hi, I'm Ellie Morrisrow, and I'm going to be next year's ASB Vice President. I'll be a senior next year. I'm super excited to work with all of you and can't wait to see what next year has in store.
Hi, I'm Lynn Smith, and I'm the Senior Class President here at CHS. For awards these past few months, we had a senior award ceremony where we passed out scholarships, athletic awards, and extracurricular awards. We also had a junior honors ceremony. And we had Miss Barrett, our principal, get the Educator of Distinction Award from the Coca-Cola Company. And then we also had most of our spring sports make it to state as well, so that's really exciting. Next, you will be hearing from Austin Smith, our new ASB Treasurer.
Hi, my name is Austin Smith, and I'm the new ASB Treasurer. I'm an incoming junior, and I'm really excited to work with the district next year.
Hi, my name is Alexi Wilson. I'm the current ASB Secretary. So our plans for the summer for Student Council, we are planning our Student Council retreat for the beginning of August to prepare for the upcoming school year and to just bond our newly elected Student Council members. We are also looking forward to enjoying our time off as well as all of our students. Now, let me introduce to you Gracie Shaver, your new ASB secretary.
Hi, my name is Gracie Shaver. I'm currently a sophomore and I'm going to be Coeur d'Alene High School's next ASB secretary. I'm extremely honored to have been elected for this position and I can't wait for this upcoming year. I'm super passionate about creating school spirit, so I can't wait to work alongside this amazing new team of ASB leaders to promote more Viking pride. I know with such a dedicated team of leaders, we're going to have a fantastic year. Roll Vikes.
I know this year has been tough, but thank you guys for sticking it out and being patient with us.
Thank you for everything that you've done for us, and this year has been truly very fun.
We look forward to see what the future holds for not only us outgoing seniors, but also the incoming students.
Well, thank you very much from Coeur d'Alene High School. That was great. And then I have K-Tech next.
Hi, I'm Cody Weidenheimer. This is Rainey and Daniel. And we do diesel technology at K-Tech. For me, it's really nice because I get to work on my dad's tractor. We're rebuilding the engine on this one. And
for me, it's K-Tech for me isn't just like something that I'm just here for as an extra part of the day. It's actually for me, it's a launch pad for me to get out and into the industry. Without K-Tech, I actually wouldn't have known a lot of the connections that I now have, and wouldn't know any of the parts of the industry that I know that I now know today.
For me, K-Tech is nice just to get my feet in the door of what I'm going to do in the future. I'm going to be a truck driver, so it's kind of nice knowing what to do and just learning all these new aspects of life and how it can help me.
So when you get done with K-Tech, what are you going to do?
yeah, I'm going to get my welding certification and then possibly go work for CAT.
I'm going to go be a truck driver.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to go be a truck driver.
I'm getting certified for aerospace science, so I'll be working on most likely rockets or some other thing for aerospace certification for mechanic work.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you to K-Tech. And those are the only two student body reports we have tonight. And so now, my student advisory group over there, how about if I have you two each introduce yourselves, and then you can take turns on how you're going to present. But I know you're talking about a draft of bylaws tonight. You push the bottom.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ainsley Brigham. I am a current junior at Lake City High School, and I am the third chair of Student Advisory Group. So today we just have a little bit of a SAG report to fill in, but Austin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Austin Smith. I am the current vice chair of the Student Advisory Group, and I will also be helping out in this presentation.
Do you need them to put
Yes, we have a slideshow presentation prepared. Could that be pulled up? Yes. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm going first, right? Yep. Okay, so this is our SAG report for the June board meeting.
Maybe just indicate next slide so they can hear you in the booth and tell you when to go.
Okay, just to start off, what we have done this month, we had a student advisory group retreat, and our council members here looked at some new applications and applicants for the upcoming 2021 through 2022 school year for the student advisory group members, and I am confident to say that we have some great new applicants and potential members for the group. On top of that, the middle school SAG group put out a middle school survey and got lots of feedback on that, which was really great. The survey really just talked about improvements and thoughts and concerns that we could put across our school. And again, got lots of feedback, so we were planning to take action on that here soon. And then lastly, we also have been very involved with the high school schedules and high school schedule committee. I went to the May committee group meeting and we've made lots of progress and it's great. And yeah, I'm just really glad that we have been super involved in that. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
So as mentioned before, we did have a retreat. Our retreat went extremely well. We engaged in a variety of team building and introspective activities. We have outlined ideas and ambitions for the upcoming year, as well as some long-term plans for the following years. So we're really excited about that.
On top of that, at the retreat, that was a really good opportunity to get all of our members from the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools there. So it was really great to see everybody in person, especially with all the difficulties this year. So at that retreat, we decided to have the new council member elections for the 2021 through 2022 year. The results were the SAG chair, Ainsley Brigham, me, the SAG vice chair, Austin Smith, and then the SAG third chair, Dylan Jones. He will be a junior next year.
Yep. So here's the big one for tonight. We have come up with some bylaws proposed. We got the basic outline from some long-range planning committee bylaws that we found. We've adapted them to fit our needs better. We've updated them, refined them, made them about SAG. And we should have shared those with you. And we also had some other board policy revisions, and we should have shared with you, again, some written testimony about that, right? Okay.
So on top of that, just for some next step lookaways, our first step was more student surveys. After we put out the middle school survey and got such great feedback, we've decided that that was a really effective way to start moving forward. So we were going to keep going on with those. On top of that, some SAG reports on policy up for action, and also continuous support of the district projects. We're just really happy to be involved in this and just sitting right here, and so we will definitely move forward with that in the future.
So this month has been extraordinarily successful for us, and we're just very excited to finish up the school year strong, and we're even more excited to get into the next year strong as well. So thank you for your time. Do you have questions? Any questions?
I just want to commend these two. They have taken this committee and they have gone above and beyond any expectation that I had for the work that you guys would do this year. So thank you so much for your hard work. It was really helpful being at the high school schedule committee and actually having Ainsley there and hearing perspective how these proposed changes would affect students. And so never before have we had real-time feedback. So we really, truly appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I want to speak a little bit to the bylaws. And so that kind of came about during their meeting, general meeting about a month and a half ago, and kind of talking about the policy and how it pertained to them, and so put a bug in their ear that if they felt as though bylaws would help them better manage their committee, and they took it on and they created these draft bylaws, and you guys did a tremendous job, and the board I know hasn't had opportunity to discuss them yet, so I don't know if we want to do that tonight or if we want to do that in July, but yep, so it'll be July that we can actually discuss them. We can reach out to you guys if we have more questions to kind of clarify, but I think as initial start, they're fantastic, and so nice job.
Well, thank you for your comments, Trustee May, and I would just echo those. Great work. Both Austin and Ainsley look forward to seeing you some more next year, and we will put your bylaws on our agenda for next month so that they can be reviewed and vetted and then probably voted on the following month after we have opportunity for comment from our community members, okay? Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Joe Brimley, I had one more quick question for them. You guys mentioned survey results, and I think maybe that's something we work on moving forward is when they do a survey, how they're going to share their survey results with the board. So we can reach out maybe at our next meeting, kind of figure out what best procedure or policy would be so we can get your guys' feedback when you do surveys.
Okay, so our next agenda item is our CEA report. Our current president, Kim Ziegler, has asked that that report be withdrawn. Her report, in her words, is no longer up to date and accurate. We've had some changes in the leadership that she had reported in that. So she's asked that to be pulled from the agenda this evening, and we will have a report and a more current and updated information on CEA, and particularly its leadership and the turnover that's going to happen in the next year in July. And so therefore, that leads us into public comment. I just have one individual, so I have a little announcement I get to read before public comment. What it says is, I would like to remind the public that this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in the public. It is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during the public comment period are limited to one comment, not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments that you would like presented to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, Lynn Town, and Ms. Town will ensure that the board members receive these additional commentary. Please keep in mind that the board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. So with that, we have one individual that signed up this evening, Marjorie Hoyt. Did I say that last name right?
I've never done this before. Do I stand up?
Oh, we'll have you go right over to that podium, Marjorie, and make sure that your microphone is on. So, yep, right there in front of Dr. Nelson. And make sure your microphone's on, and then just introduce yourself.
I think it's on. It's on.
Yes, sounds good.
My comment is that having come through since 2020, COVID, and all the problems with education, doing Zoom classes, the children are still wearing masks. I would like to say, and I haven't heard back from any of you, I wrote you all an email, why our students during classroom time are being given a COVID injection that has a lot of questions to it. It's experimental. It is not FDA approved. And at Coeur d'Alene High School, the students are asked if they would like to have the injection without parental consent. These children, I would say for the most part, are under 18 years old. That makes them a minor. And it seems to me that that's an incredible liability on the part of the school. And I'm not sure what action you guys play as the school board, but I'd like to think that as the school board, you have some impact with what goes on in the individual schools. So that is my question. I understand you're not going to answer it, and it appears that you're not going to answer it on email either. So I'm not sure where to go with this, but it just seems to me wrong that it should be done during school time when the children need all the interaction they can get with their teachers because they've missed out on so much, and B, because it is experimental and it is the demographic group that is least likely to get COVID and least likely to pass it on, that they should not be getting those shots during school time, and they should definitely not be getting them without parental consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoyt. I do believe there are some individuals in the room that can answer some of those questions for you this evening before we go. And so maybe if we have an opportunity for a break, if you stick around, I know those questions can be answered, okay?
Chair Brumley, will you indulge me just to give a brief response there?
Sure.
Thank you. So normally we don't respond to public comment, and I probably shouldn't be, but I'm going to, because I think everyone up here agrees with you wholeheartedly that we shouldn't be making those decisions for students, and we are not. I'm sorry you've been given that information, but that is incorrect. To receive a COVID vaccination in the state of Idaho, it takes parent consent if you're a minor. And so while there have been panhandle COVID vaccination clinics at some of our schools, is with parent consent, and the parents have to sign their student up for those appointments. I'm just, right, sure.
I only want to make sure that if something can be done, then
Sure.
it be done.
Right. I guess I can tell you what our communication is, and those aren't our clinics. I would assume Panhandle is very much following those rules. So. Thank you for bringing your concern. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Trustee Marshall. All right, so moving on to our next item then is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, consent agenda items pass. We also have our consent agenda items for information only. Do I have any discussion from board members or questions on those items? Okay, well, that gets us down into our first action item based on the amended agenda tonight, and that is going to be our discussion surrounding COVID protocol and planning for the upcoming 2021-2022 school year. So I will turn this over to Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Bromley. I think one of the things that has been, I think, sharply anticipated as we start to talk about the close of this year and the beginning of next year is to kind of translate into what would the operation of schools look like as we enter the 21-22 school year. And I think to do that the most justice, I think the first place to start would be to remind us where we've journeyed from, and that is that we built a plan this year in alignment with the guidance from the state Department of Education, that took into deep consideration the guidance from the CDC and Panhandle Health District. And every mitigation strategy and non-pharmaceutical intervention that we put into place were vetted through both of those entities to ensure that we were doing our part to make sure that safety of students and staff remained the primary and first kind of phase of function within the school district. And that's true any year. And I want to make sure that we reiterate that to start with, that safety becomes even before teaching and learning, because we have to create an environment in which students feel safe. We did this last summer with that guidance in place, with not necessarily knowing what we were entitled to or what we were going to experience. And so I think to go back and think about that, where we've come and where we've gone, and I want to remind us that one of the things that we chose to do, and I think is a really important move, was we established a resolution that identified the board's authority to establish those criteria that's spelled out in statute of the responsibilities of how we establish the act of schooling and the statutory obligations that schools have to provide that service. And so I think at this point, it's time to start thinking about what 21 and 22 or 21 to 22 might look like, fully knowing that we expect that the CDC guidance will be coming out very soon, and will likely continue to have some form of mitigation strategies involved. Also, additionally, we are in constant contact with the health district, and as the entity that is responsible for public health in the community, we do speak with them and meet with them regularly about what is going on. And as you well know, their guidance was imperative and important in the path we took. And so one of the things that we think is probably a very important task, the board has the authority to adopt the CDC guidelines, to adopt Panhandle Health District's guidelines, or the board also in the state of Idaho has the authority to establish by policy its own guidelines. And I think that's part of what we would want this conversation to start with, and probably knowing and understanding the way that vaccinations are playing out in the country and the way that masking is playing out in the country, that this board is fully within its right to establish a policy that veers away from CDC guidelines or that veers away from the guidance as Panhandle Health District sees it. And so as you can see in your board book, it would be our consideration that you start conversations about the fact that essentially by the time school starts in September, every parent of a middle school student, a student 12 and up, every parent that wants a vaccination for their child by that time will have had an opportunity to get that vaccination.
Additionally, there is currently research going on right now on the efficacy of the vaccinations all the way down to 2-year-old students. And so those will not be in place by the time the September first day of school rolls around, but there's also lots of data that shows that the youngest students in our system are not nearly as impacted by COVID. And so I think the standard of expectation that you may want to consider as a policy is whether or not you want to, first of all, consider whether or not masks need to be a part of the future of the school district with regards to middle school students. Because of that opportunity to become vaccinated at the middle school and high school, I think it would behoove us to consider that no longer is masking considered the front line on protection, but vaccination for those that choose it or feel like it's necessary for their own safety and well-being should be the kind of first line on this, especially indoor and outdoor. Now, what that means with regards to choice is that anybody that chooses to vaccinate their child would have that opportunity. Those that choose not to vaccinate their child, that's their decision, that's their option. But using that as the first line of defense, saying those that want to take advantage of it actually makes a lot of sense, and those that don't want to take advantage of it, that also makes sense for their families as well. I think that's the first thing, that it no longer relies on a mask being the primary line of defense, and vaccinations for those that want it now is the starting place. The second thing is, what do you do when there are positive cases? And I think this is, if we were to kind of simplify it down to, well, let's just talk about the flu, for example. And I think there's the flu is probably one logistically to give a good example on, but I think what we're navigating is what does it compare to more? Does it compare to chickenpox or mumps or something like that when you talk about contagion in large groups, or are we talking about something like the flu, in which we typically don't have to do anything unless in some cases it becomes very acute and we have a substantial problem in one of our schools, and even at 10 to 15% attendance issues with the flu, we still don't shut down our schools. But at 25 to 30%, we do. And so if you have positive cases of COVID in the schools, what is going to be that response, number one? And we would suggest that positive cases should continue to be quarantined, that just like they have been this year. And I think the question is whether or not it's our responsibility to then contact trace who those positive cases were in contact with, and whether or not those folks should be quarantined. And we would recommend, first of all, that school staff, including our nursing staff, that we adjust our approach this next year so that they are not necessarily the front line of defense as we had enlisted them as the primary contact tracers of the district, that they all were trained in the Johns Hopkins model. So it's a very reputable model, but that we turn that responsibility back over to Panhandle Health District, and that we partner with them in the collaboration of that work, whatever that might be. And then we do believe that it might be quite reasonable for expectations in the district, and this would have to be captured in policy, that those folks who are exposed or potentially exposed in a close contact to a known positive be at least notified that close contact had taken place, make sure that they know that exposure has happened, but not necessarily be mandatorily quarantined. But then maybe perhaps they are noticed that that is their option to choose to quarantine. And I think that's where it's going to get the trickiest. Those are the areas that we've seen the most challenges across the district. We've got a phenomenal nursing staff who have done everything that we've asked them to do in alignment with the policies and the plans that we wrote. And we decided early on that we were going to shift away from full level or school-wide interventions, maybe even farther than that, district interventions to school by school based upon what was happening. And we saw some changes in the way this was administered. I think we've had 6 or 7 schools that have been independently
we've had to influence and change status based upon the number of cases or the number of quarantines, or in some cases, we ran out of adults that could service students in the school during the day just because there were too many positive cases. And I think that's part of how we get out of the business of being the primary line of defense and let public health come back and do that responsibility, and how we then service that, and what is the role of quarantining have. And I think in most cases, I don't anticipate it's going to be a substantial issue, but I think in cases where we're winding up challenged right now is how do you handle a cluster of positive cases. If you've got a known cluster of positive cases, if this were mumps, if this were chickenpox, public health would partner with us. We would address it as a public health issue. And so I think the question is, where's that line where the district hands the decision off to Panhandle Health District, and where is it our responsibility through our nurses to administer to what's going on in our schools? And I think that's a little bit of what we're being challenged with right now. We've got 18 schools right now. I think we have interventions in 2 of them. And that's, I think that's the part that is, what we're suggesting is perhaps next year it might make more sense to establish more of a communication level and let the health district take that a step further. The health district this year has been reluctant to some extent to mandate this because they recognize and honor the authority that the school board has. And so our suggestion would be that it's very important to write policy that aligns that, because right now what the current governance looks like would be that CDC and Panhandle's guidance is kind of the authorizing agency of the mitigation strategies that this board has adopted. This board is fully within its right and the expectation to establish policy that lowers that strategy to use something that is a little more locally controlled. And in the state of Idaho, that is not only warranted, that's acceptable. And so I think at this point, that's probably enough. I think one of the things that you're going to want to work through are the challenges that would be presented in and when you have multiple cases in a school, and how you're going to handle those and what those strategies might look like, because that will be unique, and I would suggest it needs to be handled case-by-case basis. So I'd be glad to answer any questions, or if you have really technical questions, I'd be glad to ask my good friend Nicole Piekarski to come up and help.
All right, I'll open up to you guys for comments or questions.
We anticipate that the state will give us new guidance for next year.
We anticipate that the state will give us new guidance that authorizes the school board to do exactly what the school board believes is the right thing to do.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Cook, I'd just like to start by acknowledging Nicole Piekarski and the work her team has done. It's been a difficult year for everybody. I see kind of 2 divided rooms, and I can't imagine every time you guys had to make a phone call that it was a different response on the end of the line. So it's been a tough year, and thank you guys for your work and trying to keep our kids and students safe. I think the recommendation from your team, Dr. Cook, to me makes the most sense. I think we are moving into a new phase of this pandemic, and it should be managed as such. And so moving forward to next year, I think looking at it like we treat chickenpox or pertussis, the only thing I would be worried about is that we make sure we notify students that were exposed if they do have a family member that was exposed in the home who potentially the vaccine isn't as successful as we had hoped. So solid organ transplants, autoimmune disease, cancer patients, I think those parents or family members have a right to know that there was a case in the room while maintaining privacy of the person. But I think this looks like a good pivot for me moving forward. I think there's no one in this room that wants another year of masks, and I think that's a reasonable approach moving forward. So thank you for your hard work.
I'll go next. So I appreciate the work here, and I know it's been an exhausting year for Nicole and the school nurses, and I'm sure no one's more excited for Friday than they are. But I appreciate the approach. I'm a little concerned it's just a lot of words, and is it just simplified? And for me, I'd rather just see us simplify it that masks are not going to be required. And I know this is what it says, but that masks are not required, that the district's only going to quarantine known positives, and that the district is not going to be the lead in contact tracing or quarantining except for those known positives. I think on the other part, what do we do if we have outbreaks? I don't know. I need some more time on that, or I think I'd like to hear Dr. Hawker kind of weigh in on that, and maybe we do that after we get a little more guidance. But I have some concerns there, I guess, what that looks like, and at what point do those, would interventions be necessary, I guess. And I think it's a much different threshold than what we've used this year. I guess I would put it that way for me. So.
I agree. Just clean it up and make it a little simpler form, and then we figure out the clusters and the outbreaks, what that's going to look like, and have it kind of spelled out crystal clear.
It's almost back to where we wanted to be at the very beginning, when we'd ask for metrics and no one could give us metrics of where to go. And so if Panhandle could continue to give us maybe even a clearer idea of what that means, what's the number, what's the outbreak, and that type of thing, that would be helpful. Just so even as a community we can understand more that, okay, we've had a lot of feedback. Oh, there's only 3 cases. Well, what does that mean, in each school? And so some more understanding on that would be really helpful. Otherwise, I appreciate all this work that has gone into this and getting us to this point. Thank you.
Well, my thoughts are, I want to start with the vaccines, and nobody said any comment on vaccines, but my opinion is that we would not have an expectation that our children be vaccinated, that this would be purely by choice of kids in school, and we wouldn't have any policies that are built around the vaccination. And I don't believe that's what's being said at all. I just want it clear that, I think the district, at least what I'm hearing the district say, is because vaccines are available to kids, then those who want to can, those that don't have to. But that there isn't any recommendation here of pushing or advocating or wanting our children vaccinated in any way. Because I think there can be a misperception by the fact that we've talked about vaccinations being available. So I just want to make sure that that comment is clearly articulated to the public.
No, thank you for that, Chair Bromley. We're not pushing vaccinations. What we are saying, quite simply, is because of the availability of vaccinations, by the first day of school, every 6th grader through 12th grader, I suppose there's a few that could have a birthday issue there, that wants a vaccine has the availability and the opportunity to get a vaccine. And so that obligation that is clearly articulated in statute for the school district to create a safe environment for students is no longer necessarily the lead on that part of the conversation. And so, no, we're not pushing for vaccinations, but what we are saying is, now that vaccinations are readily available, that is the way that the district would perceive that, so that all those that want it have the opportunity to get it. And that is the way that the narrative changes. Not necessarily that everybody needs to get the vaccine. That's a whole different conversation.
Dr. Cook, I thought that your comments made sense, and Nicole, please interject if you think this isn't correct. But we're shifting a mindset in how we deal with this, and we have really good policy about communicable diseases and how we handle them. And I know just this month we've had some chickenpox in our district, and those families that were affected got a notice that there was an elementary case of chickenpox. It didn't disclose who the case was, but I imagine that we'll pivot more towards that direction where nobody had to mask, nobody was quarantined. This is a disease that we know is contagious, and therefore, we follow public health policy on that. That's public health policy, not district policy. And so I agree with Trustee Morsrow that cleaning this up so it's very clear on what our families can expect moving forward would be helpful, but that we're understanding it like we do every other measles outbreak, mumps, chickenpox, et cetera, that's the framework that this disease will now live. Nicole, does that seem like a reasonable approach, or is that even overstating it too much?
Thank you, Chair Brumley, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. That is my ultimate hope, yes. Right now, that we know that public health policy does not say that. And so we'll look to see what that public health policy says in the coming years.
So right now, is it fair to say that they're still putting COVID-19 in its own kind of silo? Okay. And you don't anticipate when you might have guidance that will change?
Any day. They are saying that the guidelines for school operations will be posted within the next few weeks, is what they said 2 weeks ago. And previously, I thought they probably wouldn't change much. But in talking with people around the nation, I now think it could be anything. I don't know what the recommendations will say, but they do specifically post right now that their intention is that those guidelines can be used to inform decisions for the next school year.
Great. And if I interpret your guys' initial draft, it seems like you are pivoting towards treating it like a flu outbreak or a measles outbreak. And so I think that is some consolation to those that are listening in the audience, that it won't be an emergency authorization or emergency policy for next year, that we'll be pivoting back. Do you anticipate us even having a policy regarding COVID-19, or is that what you kind of want to wait and watch?
Let me weigh in on that, if I may, Trustee May. I think there does need to be a policy, and I think it needs to be clearly articulated on the stance, because there is this tricky place of the CDC and the health district giving out much stricter guidance than I think many districts are interested in adopting. And so therefore it would be my recommendation that this district write its own policy with regards to the path forward on how, not only what's the stance on masking and the stance on quarantining, but what steps are going to be articulated, so if and when there is a cluster or an issue or an outbreak, when do we take some kind of action in that regard? And so it's because the board has the authority, and because the likely alignment of a policy that I'm anticipating this board wanting wouldn't be in perfect alignment with CDC, that it's a good and wise decision to write that policy so that it is explicitly clear on those issues.
So is that something that could begin to be brought back to us in July, even before Dr. Hucker comes on? Is there a timeline, kind of, Nicole, for writing out actual policy? Or
that would be my hope, that our team would have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Hucker after he arrives, and then discuss with you all again.
So later July, maybe we'd see that for the first time, that actual policy?
I'm an 11-month employee, and I do hope to take some time off. And Dr. Hucker will arrive, I think, on July 6th will be his first day. So it will be after that.
I think it's safe to say that the first draft of the policy would not include language about masks, and it would not include language about quarantining.
I appreciate your recommendation, Dr. Cook, that we have that in policy, and I think that's good. I'm concerned about the timing on that, because there are people who are trying to plan and figure out what they're trying to do, and they want to know how our district can operate, whether that's people who have at-risk family member at home, or whatever the situation may be. So this is an action item I'd like us to take action, if we could, at least on those couple of tenets of the policy to be drafted, that we're not going to require a mask, that we're only going to quarantine known positives, and that we're not, the district isn't going to do our own contract tracing or quarantining.
I would agree with that, and I didn't get past my vaccine comments, but I do not want to see masking next year. I do not want to see us quarantining healthy kids next year. I'd like to see us only quarantining positive known cases. We are not going to be in the business of contract tracing, I would hope. And I hear what Dr. Cook is saying, is that, I guess my opinion is, we have policy in place for communicable disease. And so we would be utilizing that existing policy. Or, when we've got cases of 30% of our students being out of school, whether it's the flu, whether it's chickenpox, or whether it's COVID, I don't think anybody would disagree that probably need to have a stopgap there to stop that spread. But that wouldn't be any different than any other disease at this point. And how we treat COVID-19, what I'm hearing Dr. Cook say is, if what we want to do is not in line with the CDC and what we want to do is not in line with what Panhandle says, then we may need a policy. And so I can see that potentially developing based on recommendations that would come out that we haven't heard yet. But I agree with Trustee Morris, or I would like this board to, I would like to see a motion tonight come out about masking and quarantining for next year so our parents can plan. And I, just an FYI, I did talk to Dr. Hawker today. He was aware of the recommendations that were being set out tonight, and he agrees. He is currently in his own district already started policies that don't involve masking. They are not quarantining except for positive cases where he's at. So he thinks that's the trend and agrees with that. So I don't think a motion like that by the board tonight would be inconsistent with where Dr. Hawker currently sits, but he also commented what may come from the CDC and what may come from Panhandle Health is something we may need to take our own position on moving forward, but we don't know what that's going to be right now. And I also would, my position would be that this is a K through 12 policy, not a 6 through 12 policy. I would like to see all of our kids covered under, well, when I say policy, decision, a K through 12 decision, that it's not just for kiddos that have vaccines available, but that we're talking K through 12.
Chair Brumley, if I may, I just would like to respectfully request that what we're talking about is required masking, so that there's no presupposition on those that are choosing to mask or that would request the opportunity to mask. And really what the issue is about is the required masking.
And if I misstated that, I apologize. That was my intent.
Does anyone have a motion written up?
I don't have a motion written up, but I could probably craft one up. I'll make a motion that the board direct administration to develop policy regarding our 2021-2022 COVID operations, and that the policy include that mask will not be required, that the district will only quarantine known positives, and that the district will not contact trace or quarantine those who are not positive.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just had a quick question to clarify, and it is after your last comments, Chair Brumley. I do wonder if we need an additional policy. As you said, if we recognize the CDC is giving us guidelines, it's not policy that we're mandated to enforce. Are we making it more difficult for the community if we're creating a separate policy? We know what their guidelines are. We don't know what they will be yet, but they will be apparent once they make them. We have a very robust communicable disease policy. So I guess I would ask the district to look at that, and if that would also work in lieu of making additional policy that may even be more difficult for us down the road. What I'm hearing us say tonight is it would be treated like chickenpox or pertussis. And so do we need additional policy? It seems it was difficult last year, and moving away from controversial policies again, I think would be helpful. So I think exploring it, and maybe we could wait and see what the CDC says, but if it's only a recommendation, this board has authority, do we need to create more policy if we have policy that meets our needs, is my question.
I'd like to see the policy just for the clarity purpose of it, because I think it's very easy to look at our policies and have different interpretations of them. And I'm just concerned that if we don't at least set that framework, that there's going to be more questions than answers as we move forward. So I think it allows for some policy to perhaps address an outbreak and those sorts of things as they develop that. And hopefully we'll have that guidance by the time we start working on that. But it also is very clear of what our overarching stance is going to be as a district as we move to next school year. So.
Dr. Cook, the original COVID policy and many of our policies were all placed into one kind of, can you speak to that? Does that whole part eventually need to be revoked? I thought that was part of the original conversation, is to understand that.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. The the original design of what we entered into was built through a resolution, and I think two things that come to mind top of hand were that it was dated for the 2021 school year, first of all, and then secondly, the simple rescission of the resolution negates all of those mitigation strategies moving forward. So both of those things I think are in place. So I would want to check with legal. I think it would make sense that in July you would kick those off and either renew or revise or change or drop completely. But I think we also did that by date as well. So I think you're covered twice.
Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of the motion regarding COVID protocols for next year, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you.
Ms. Brumley or Chair Brumley, can I just request that we review that resolution at next month's meeting if it didn't have an expiration date?
Yes, I'll
I
make
think it
sure
would
it's on
be
the agenda.
appropriate.
Ms. Town, you know that it'll be on the agenda. All right, so that being our only action item that was sort of moved up, I will go back to our original agenda list, which now we have Dr. Cook's superintendent report.
So I'm going to move to the podium and get set up to do this presentation, which is going to be a review of the last couple of years. And I've got a bad feeling that a whole bunch of people are getting ready to walk out of the room when I get ready to start this. So give me just a minute.
Are you ready?
All right, I am ready. Thank you, Chair Brumley and trustees. I'm very excited to share with you. And by the way, put a stopwatch on this. We have 57 slides. I told them we'll get this done in 20 minutes. I'm not kidding. So we're going to review the last 3 years and all the things that we've accomplished the last 3 years and kind of put a flag in all that's been done. And just spend some time looking back and reviewing. Gosh, I want the keyboard out too. So, all right, I'm going to spend 5 minutes of my time just getting adjusted. So let's start with, first of all the focus on teaching and learning. It started with, if you recall, right as I got here, we started discussing doing a curricular audit. And it was actually the suggestion of my predecessor, Interim Superintendent Stan Olson, that we spend some time and investment in doing so. So we went through the process to implement the curricular audit. We did a tremendous amount of work. We got all of those samples, and it was presented to this board in February of 2019, the very first year that we were done. They reviewed lots and lots of samples of student work and gave us some very specific guidance based upon that. Those recommendations were quite simple, that we needed to spend a substantial amount of time of making sure that every kid had access to a quality learning experience. We had to spend time on a curriculum assessment, professional development, Making sure that our resources were focused in funding was presented so that that access to all of those things were being done in a fair and equitable fashion and having impact. We were aligning policies and making sure that our job descriptions were aligned. And last but not least, building a long-range facility plan that established some criteria for how we wanted to function over the next 10 years. This was a big task, and I don't know if you remember when we presented this out to the schools. We asked for lots and lots of documents. We asked for a pretty quick turnaround, and if you recall, one of the things that was a little bit troublesome is we needed some time to compile all of this information, and so we had a little bit of disconnect, but we did get it in right at the end of the school year. We got the presentation started that year. The auditors presented their findings to this board in, I think it was the May board meeting, might have been the June board meeting of 2019. And we started writing plans that were 3 to 5 year plans to address all of those issues moving forward. Additionally, the other big driver that was being worked on before I got here was the Portrait of a Graduate work. And I think Dr. Trina Cottle was the first one that said she presented on this in 2017. And then Stan Olson, the interim superintendent, also were doing, they called them data summits that year. And I remember talking with cabinet members about the amount of information that was shared in those summits that gave a good perspective of where the district was located. From that data, and from future interventions and conversations we had with parents, students, teachers, and principals, we developed our pathway to Portrait of a Graduate. That developed in 2019, 2020, could probably be backtracked all the way to the early parts of 2017, 2018. Tremendous number of listening sessions, workshops, and feedback from just about everybody that would talk to us about it. We developed, we got dialed in on those kinds of things that parents would want to see from their kids. My kid knows the Pythagorean theorem but can't save $5. I need my kid to learn more about financial literacy and time management and critical thinking and how to think and not just to know all the pieces that we expect of them in our schools. We took that information and we compiled it, we synthesized it and compiled it into what you know now as the Portrait of a Graduate work. Boy, was that a lot of challenge. And every one of these 6 C's that we've developed has a very explicit build out and criteria that give us as indicators for each of those 6 C's. So from that, those 2 items, from the Portrait of a Graduate and the audit work, we built a strategic plan. And quite simply, we aligned all of the moves that the adults make in our school districts so that in the strategic plan, they will deliver upon giving students the experience that we called for and asked for in the Portrait of a Graduate work. So think of those things as 2 different pieces. The strategic plan are the moves of the adults so that the Portrait of a Graduate provides the opportunity for each and every kid to maximize their best potential. And so in the summer of 2020, we adopted 6 components of the strategic plan, and they're listed there. The curricular management plan, the instructional framework, the blended learning plan, the social emotional learning plan, the assessment plan, and the equity plan. Learning management plan was necessary, and the timing couldn't have been better. In 2020, we had to have a way and a mechanism for how we were going to deliver instruction remotely or for any part of teaching and learning that was going to happen in the 2021 school year so that students would have access to their learning, whether they were at home, whether they were at school. And we adopted Schoology as the system that we were using for our learning management system. We implemented Seesaw for our students, and we had Caitlin Tucker do some tremendous professional development work for our teachers and providing that tech support so that was in place for the 2021 school year and beyond. We also implemented full-day kindergarten. If you recall, we had 4 schools in 2018 when I first got here that were doing full-day kindergarten, and we started to try to trickle that into our other elementary schools. And the very first version of this, in 2018, 2019, we put a pilot in full-day kindergarten in 2 schools. Does anybody remember those 2 schools? Sorensen and Hayden Meadows. And those were, because there was no state funding for this, we did a cost-neutral pay to participate model. And I think the original, the early tuition was $175 a month, if I recall correctly. And we lost money on that, but not much. We almost washed out perfectly. I think we were down $10,000, $12,000 at the end of the year. We added, the following year, we added 4 more tuition-based classrooms across our other elementary schools. Nexa became a full-day, free full-day kindergarten. That's hard to say. We now have 22 full-day K classrooms across the district this year. And we are, as you well know, going to, well, we'll talk about that a little later. We will have more of them next year. Additionally, this year, we implemented on a whim the Coeur d'Alene eSchool. And the fascinating thing about that was, we'll have a couple of hundred kids. We'll have some families take advantage of this. And we all just watched the ticker of enrollment go up over the couple of weeks that it was taking place until we got into the 1,300 student range. That's what it peaked out at. And Brian Kelly and Becky Miller were called upon and said, please, oh good gosh, help us start this and make it well. And they did a phenomenal job. It settled in around 1,000 kids for the year, and K-12, they delivered teaching and learning for all of those students. We used the Hayden Lake School again when we said for so many years that we'd stop using that school. That school was in full use again this year. 46 teachers spent their year teaching and supporting the learning of those 1,000 students in Coeur d'Alene eSchool. Okay, so let's shift a little bit to budget and levies. When I first got here, one of the very first things that I did was just go around and do listening sessions to anybody and everybody that would listen. I talked to teachers, I talked with principals, I talked with students, I talked with community members, I talked with local leaders. Anybody that would give me audience, I would ask them what do they want for their schools. And from them, we came up with 5 very substantial points of feedback. And they're listed there for you. Let's start with the first one, building budgets. This came from feedback that I heard from all over the district, teachers saying, I'm tired of using my own money to buy supplies for my classrooms. And so one of the things we found and decided to commit to was adding resources that go directly to building budgets that are earmarked specifically for teachers' classroom resources and needs. Second one was professional development. There was a want, a craving, and a desire for professional development funds to provide a little more diversified and I don't want to say diversified, choiced professional development for the district and for the teachers in our district. And so we added $400,000, of which $200,000 went directly into building funds that principals and their teachers and their leadership teams could then earmark. And the other $200,000 were sent centrally to help fund the requests that were coming out of buildings that we wanted to do common professional development across the district. The third one, and by far the most expensive out of that levy ask, was we wanted to do a move to recruit and retain staff. In that particular time, what I heard dramatically was that veteran staff were not being compensated well enough to stay competitive in the region. And so we run the numbers to see what a 6% raise would cost for teachers. And that was a $2.5 million investment. Teachers and administrators and others, all classified staff across the district received, I think, one of the larger raises in recent history with those levy dollars. And I don't want to it would be remiss if we didn't talk about the investment that we put into increasing campus safety and safety in both of our high schools, our comprehensive high schools, and adding an SRO. We now have a fairly even division with our elementary schools so that there's an SRO for every 4 elementary schools. And we added a security technician at the district office to go out and do camera installation because we have about 1,200 cameras. And last but not least, a tremendous amount of investment was placed in mental health. And if you want to think back, I don't want to go into the detail of it, but 2018 was a tough year for our community. And it brought to light many of the things that we were all being challenged with and that people in the community were asking us to deal with. And so we doubled down, if you will, on providing mental health resources in our community, with our students and with our staff. We expanded resources. We implemented sources of strength across the district in all of our secondary schools, and we added school psychs and counselors. And I'll say this kind of quickly. We added the mental health coordinator position and mental health specialist position. And quite frankly, the positive feedback on Andy and Keith just continues to come in. And their impact across the district is astounding. I just want to take a second to talk about sources of strength and why we feel like this is a point of success for our secondary schools. The primary reason is that students own it. And so students take pride in this, and it's creating a community and culture around it's safe to talk about things that maybe we haven't been feeling safe to talk about in the past. And so saying the word suicide used to be stigmatic and used to cause people concern, and being able to just talk about and support one another is a dialogue that is so refreshing to see our students own, in many cases even now in the middle schools and elementary schools, kids talking about depression and things that they're struggling with, and it's no longer a stigma for that to happen. And Sources of Strength has actually changed the trajectory of those conversations across all of our schools. It creates a social network and an environment in which kids feel safe, in which adults feel safe, and people can lean in and have really direct and difficult conversations in order to support one another in our schools. If you remember in 2021-2023 levy campaign, we said, look, let's just hold the line. We're not going to ask for more. We're not going to ask to increase it. As a matter of fact, just holding the line, our levy is now around $1.71 in the community because we've had tremendous growth. And if you also remember, we spent a lot of time talking with you here and with the community about our commitment to allowing our tax rate to decrease, because we were having increased property taxes. We were seeing an increase in the general homeowner, and our goal was to try to thread the margin of just new growth and development, because our goal was to make sure that our property taxes didn't increase on the backs of our patrons, but only on new growth and development. And so when we said, can we please just hold the line for the 21 through 23 levy, we got a substantial amount of support from the community, and they still feel like that they support the direction that we're headed with a positive vote in that regard. So let's talk about some operational stuff for a minute. This is actually some pretty exciting things as well. When I got here, we had the 27 bond program was well underway. We were, if you recall, this was a highly successful bond with a lot of support across the community, a little over $35 million, earmarked to put additions on 4 schools and to build a new elementary school. And when I first got here, I jaw-dropped how $35 million was going to be able to accomplish all those things. But here we stand a little later. We have a brand new bus loop at Fernan Elementary School. It's no longer brand new, but from that bond, it was new. We have Dalton Elementary was renovated. 3 brand new classrooms. We renovated the music room and the stage. We added a parking lot. They have a nice, the most popular thing in the whole area is the ball wall. Everybody loves that. We're still working on a reader board, and I don't know what Jeff's doing and why he can't get that accomplished, but one of these days I think he will. There's a story there. One of the ones that I think we're all the most proud of, and I want to make sure we draw attention to, is the fact that we have presented a middle school renovation at Lakes Middle School that has been in a very strong need for many, many years, and to deliver a brand new media center, to to loop the building in, that media center does a really nice job of creating a rectangle now. It used to be a U shape, and if you were on one end of that U, you had to walk all the way to the other end of that U to go to the offices. Brand new gym floor, locker rooms, band and choir room. The shop is amazing, and the parking lot out front is such a huge addition. We were constantly parking on the street, and there's still parking on the street, but now there's a parking lot in front too. And this, to me, this is a promise held to the community that needed to be held for quite some time. We had renovations at Lake City High School, 10 brand new classrooms, new gymnasium, the wrestling room. Those classrooms, by the way, are all full. We still have, and we are back to teachers on a cart. That's not a surprise. Coeur d'Alene High School, we had 8 new classrooms. We also built another gym there. The V is one of the coolest things I think you'll see in any high school. I think it's really impressive. Brand new gym as well. The multi-purpose room, and we spent some, we can't take credit for all of that weight equipment, but the Coeur d'Alene boosters sure can. And I think next, one of the exciting things about this is the fact that we built an elementary school that when I first got here, didn't have a location established. We knew was already over budget and we hadn't even started. 53,000. So this is a very 53,000 square feet, very typical in size elementary school for what you'd see across the country. I think one of the most exciting and proud moments we ever had was opening that in the middle of a pandemic, on budget and on time. What an accomplishment. And from where the challenges that came along with this, if you recall, at one point we were thinking we were going to be buying a stoplight, and we were going to be the proud owners of a stoplight so that we could get at traffic. And then we got hung up on how we were going to get access to Prairie. We spent, I think, 7 months and multiple meetings to be able to get access, and now we're the proud owners of a beautiful median strip on Prairie that helps. Right now, it doesn't seem to be working as well as we'd like because there is a lot of construction traffic that's interfering with that. But I do anticipate once that construction traffic closes, that'll be much better in the future. But this is a beautiful school with a lot of great upgrades for a new school. The bus loop and the way they manage traffic in and out is amazing. And to have this built during the pandemic and on time is just such a fun thing to talk about anywhere we go. And I don't know if you know this, but we've actually now gone back and we've built 4 brand new entrances across the district using funds that the district had from facility rentals, just to upgrade the entrances to try to get to that kind of single point of entry at Lake City High School, Venture High School, Woodland Middle School, and at the district office. And all of those are completed now, and we finally have a plan that's going to work for Coeur d'Alene High School that we're going to, now that it's been approved on the consent agenda, we'll start this summer. And by the way, we've got permits waiting on that. So Jeff did get that taken care of very, very quickly, and we'll have that ready to go for you. Hopefully, knock on wood, we'll have much of that knocked out this summer so students at CHS won't see a tremendous burden on that. If you also recall, back in 2018, we purchased 40 acres for the land bank for the school district. That was an exciting moment. That land is just sitting on the corner of Prairie and Hutter. And if you recall, that was a pretty quick and simple negotiation, and we were excited to get that land. Now, that land's not ready to be developed, but it's a long way closer to it now than it was. And I would say that right now the school district is sitting in very good position with those 40 acres in the northwest corner of the district. Additionally, we're in discussion, as you well know, with Lakeside Capital Group to partner on 20-acre site for a middle school in their new development and a 10-acre site in the development for an elementary school. And you can kind of see there's 3 green stars on this pictogram. Our stars that we anticipate would be the top green star is where we anticipate that middle school going at some point. It's on the edge of this development, and the lower green star on the right is where we would anticipate the next elementary school going. Both of those would be on the west side of the district, servicing the heavy growth that's happening in the western, really the northwestern quarter of our district. And we continue those negotiations and discussions with Lakeside. If and when that opportunity arises, that would be 3 locations, 70 acres total on the western northwest portion of the school district, of which schools could be located in the very near, or other facilities, if necessary, could be located.
Does the third star mean that you're giving us big news now, that they're donating a site?
So the other third star is where they want to put another elementary school, and if you notice, that's well into the Post Falls School District. So we're going to let Dina and her team figure out how to do something over there. And another shout out to Jeff. I guess this is the pick on Jeff hour. We have spent a lot of time researching and going through, and his team has done a tremendous job in the adoption of a deferred maintenance plan. If you recall, we requested a couple of years ago to partner with Amoresco to use, they have some tracking software that you use for facilities that essentially will look at everything mechanical, everything you have to replace in your facilities, and you document that. And you use your existing staff to track that, and you use it to determine the life cycles and when things need to be replaced. And so using the Amoresco Asset Planner, we have now prioritized all of the different ways that we're going to have to spend money in the future to maintain the district's investment in its properties. We also adjusted the school boundaries. And if that was a year-long process in which we attempted to do quite a few things. The first one was to try to balance enrollment. If you remember, does anybody remember the enrollment of Ramsey Elementary School when we started this process? Because if you remember, Ramsey had the largest geographic region in the whole area when you included what its overlay. Does anybody remember how much it was at its peak? 750 students at its highest. And after we finished that, and we've still got some work to do because we didn't get all of the areas arranged completely, but we've gotten most of, at least 3/4 of the elementary schools, the high schools, and the middle schools adjusted to balance enrollment, to better balance demographics, and to start the beginning of a feeder system. Additionally, not only internal boundaries, but also the external boundaries. So right when I arrived, we were tying up the loose ends on the Post Falls boundary. And what you see here in this diagram on the far left is the new and updated western boundary of our school district with Post Falls. If you recall, we kind of straightened out along Hutter and traded some stuff around Mill River to balance that out. And on the north and I guess north and east, northwest, kind of northern boundary, I guess is the best way to say it. We're negotiating with them right now to flatten that out just a little bit. The trade that we're talking about is in the very most northeast corner would go to the Lakeland School District. For the very most northwest corner, that little carve out weird kind of squaring that up with Hayden Avenue. And so we'll be proposing that to the State Board of Education here this summer to try to see if they are willing to approve that transfer of property between the two school districts. We completed the long-range facility plan, which is a 10-year plan. It was adopted and approved in 2020. It did a 10-year projection on enrollment growth, building and residential needs, and recommendations for where we would place schools, and the fact that we do recognize and know that we have deferred maintenance issues that we are going to have to address. And I think the growth conversation continues. I think this is an interesting year for this conversation to be discussed because right now we know our enrollment is down, but we also know our overall enrollment is down. But the growth that is happening at our secondary schools is tremendous. And we're anticipating another 200 kids next fall. And so we continue to engage in those community conversations about, first of all, how do we track growth in the community? Secondly, how do we get our state and our potentially even our municipalities to support the idea that with growth comes responsibilities for us to pay for that. And whether or not the State Department is willing to push for the idea of impact fees. We restructured the district to give kind of this operational side and an instructional side, and the assistant superintendents oversee the instructional side. I continue to oversee both instructional and operational side. This has been, I think, a much more streamlined process that's helped with a lot of work. We did some very quick moves with that, with producing the assistant superintendent positions. We added system performance to Mike's position. We added a curriculum director. And we split Katie's position and added Jeff's position so that we now had someone doing just finance, and Jeff was added to do just operations. And I think it's made for a very good flow and made for a very efficient approach to district operation. Additionally, and I love this video because look at I don't know if you can see me on this video, but I evidently have one shirt. I was thanking Scott for that. This is a really important thing that I think the board has done a fantastic job on, and that is to produce, first of all, produce a board handbook that's this is the governance of the board. We have committed to live streaming our board meetings. We've adopted a documentation process called Board Book Premier, which is, I think, the way that Lynn has helped us adopt that has been tremendous, and she's been such an asset for that. We continue to push out weekly board notes that gives the board communication for issues and things that they need to know of. And our community can email the trustees with the click of a button by hitting trustees to all of you. So just the creating accessibility and transparency so that anybody at any time can reach the board or get information into your hands quickly is now quite readily available with our public. Somebody's got to buy me another. We have brand new buses with seat belts. We have brand new software that tracks that helps us build and track our routes. And we haven't implemented it completely yet. We're working on this now, but we have GPS. We have the ability to start to know where our buses are at a moment's time. And when we get this fully adopted, parents will be able to know where their kid's bus is, whether or not their kid got on the bus, and where they are in their route. And so it'll help when you're transporting 4,000 kids all over the community. It's going to be a great asset. This might be the most exciting slide to talk about just because it's nothing more than some policy revision. But if you recall, we did not have policy that supported the documentation of how to become a magnet school or what it takes to stay a magnet school or what are the governance of the magnet school. And it took us, if you didn't know this, 14 months from the very first time we had that conversation till the last stroke of the pen when we approved all of that documentation. But honestly, that policy and that governance model will live on and is a great resource for both the Ramsey community and the Sorensen community going forward. 14 months, guys. And I'm very proud to share this with you. SAG is up and running and doing well. And a shout out to Lillian Smith. It was her email from the very beginning that said, you guys should do that. And we decided it was a brilliant idea, and SAG is here and they're with us and we are so proud of them. And they're already talking transition, peaceful transition of power year to year. Nobody contested the transition of that power. Is awesome. So what's next? What are we handing off? What is unfinished? What are the things we need to continue doing? Implement the strategic plan. I think that's going to be the biggest. There's a great document. There's great resources. There's lots of availability of how we get that built into place. But implementation is going to be substantial. And there are going to need to be systems in place that say, are we doing it and are we doing it well? And what are we going to do when it's not being done well? And how do we not punish, but how do we support schools that need the support in that getting to that destination? And remember, the timeline on this has to be reasonable. This is a major shift in direction, and it's going to take time to get there. We got to get full day kindergarten up all across the district. We want to make it an access for every 5-year-old in the area that's in our community, so that they can get into full day kindergarten. And we think we're almost there. Right now, at this moment, we have over 700 kids already registered for kindergarten for next year. All schools, no tuition for any kid next fall. These pictures were taken at the last high school schedule meeting with students cheering for the schedule that they wanted. I can't take credit for that joke. That was Scott Maben joke. I'm stealing that, so stealing that. We hope to have this resolved and ready to implement before the 22-23 school year. So that means this year, got to get it worked out, do all the professional development for whatever schedule is adopted, whatever those circumstances look like. But we're getting closer, and it has been a challenge, but we continue to get it tighter and tighter, and we're getting ready to go out for focused feedback, and I will leave it at that because Kelly's got an update on that for later. And we hope to, if you recall, we had a recommendation on school start times months and months ago, and because it was a little bit of a split, and there was actually a recommendation to change school start times, but it was also a split vote and there was a minority report. And I think because we had so many irons in the fire and we were starting to have a lot of things that we knew we needed to do later, we decided to pause on that. So whatever that change would look like, right now the recommendation that came from administration was to flip elementary and secondary start times, and for that to be implemented, during that 22-23 school year when those schedules would be changed at the high school. So we would still stand by that implementation and recommendation. We've got a lot of work to do with making sure that teachers know and understand the expectations of the strategic plan. It's going to be focused on the guidance and the things that we've developed through the audit, through the strategic plan timeline, and to provide that portrait of a graduate vision for every student. And I don't know if you know this, but we're almost ready to push this out. We have now the ability to register students online only, no more paper registrations. That's going to be a game changer. It's in beta mode right now. It's still got some work to do and some bugs to work out, but we are fully prepared to roll that out for this fall's registration. We also have to finish up those revisions. If you recall, right now we have the southeast quadrant of our schools. We paused on the revisions for the attendance boundaries for the elementary schools in our southeast quadrant of our community. And additionally, there's some work that's already been done for what do we do when we have these proposed new schools being brought back in. All that work's already posed and ready to go. Poised and ready to go. So when that time comes, we can bring that back in front of you to talk about next steps. And this slide is a little scary, but it's important, and I think it's worth noting, and I think this is something that the district and the board is going to continue to want to talk through. In our very first recommendation a couple years ago on deferred maintenance, we were $17 million behind, if you will, and that was actually a fair rating. And that was back in 2020. And if you recall, if you tracked that all the way to 2029, I'm looking at the yellow boxes. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see it there. If we do nothing and just sit on where we're at with deferred maintenance, by the time we get to 2029, we're at $77 million of unfunded liability that is a tremendous issue for this district to address. Because if you look at the top left number, we have 1.36 million square feet of resources, of facilities, 40 total buildings in the district at essentially a cost replacement value of $395 million for all of our property. If you just do the buildings, it's still over $300 million. That is an investment that this community has in their facilities. And I think for us, one of the things that we would like to remind the district and the board is that that's an investment, and you want to take care of those investments. You don't want to just continue to drive your car without changing the oil. And so the deferred maintenance, while we think we're in a pretty decent place now, that's going to continue to exacerbate over time if we do nothing. And so there needs to be some commitment, whether it's through the long-range planning committee or the board or even district working with all three entities to start to develop a strategy to make sure that those issues are being addressed. And that's it. And that's Blue. If you don't know Blue, Blue is the most famous dog in Winton Elementary School. Any questions? Yeah, 37 minutes. But I also started about 3 minutes early, so.
says it's, oh, there we go. Okay. Well, first, I got to get my notes, if you will. So I have a quote from Pele that struck me as being perfect for what you do and who you are. Success is no accident. It is hard work, perseverance, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you are doing or learning to do. And it truly, to me, is exactly what you have done for this district, and the love and the passion that you've had for kids and your staff, your teachers. Everybody has just been exemplified day in and day out. And so we're going to miss you without question. I just wanted, I made this easy on myself because I made you tell us all the great things that you had done so that I didn't have to go back through all of it and share it with the community as though, I was just regurgitating. But it is true. What you've done for us has been amazing. Of note, though, to me is the Lakes Middle School project and then the gym. If you'll recall, then they sold portions of the gym to the community to raise money. And just that kind of innovation and that kind of continuing to think outside the box. And maybe that wasn't your idea, but certainly was under your tutelage, and I thought was a super cool part. The acquisition of land while you have been here has been nothing but incredible. Putting us back on the radar with planning and zoning, with developers, with the city of Coeur d'Alene. Jeff Voller being, again, it's the Jeff Voller hour, being a critical part of that. But those pieces will carry us for years. And we didn't have those before you came in here, Steve. So what really, really bums me out is I can only imagine what we would have if COVID hadn't hit. If you'd had another year, year and a half to truly bring many more of your visions to light, it would have just been exciting and wonderful to watch. So if you'll hold this for me for a second.
Man, now I see why Amy didn't want to talk.
Okay. So will you hold that up so I can read it? So this is for you on behalf of the board. This is Dr. Stephen Cook. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you for all your tireless dedication to the staff and students of Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. You have been an inspirational leader. Our best wishes go with you. Thank you so much, Steve, for everything.
I want to go sit down.
I'll let you sit down, except our trustees might have some questions based on your presentation, but you can do it from over there. Oh, and I'll put this back. All right, let him get his water. And then if you guys had comments or anything you wanted to say. Did you want to say anything?
I think I just would like to thank the community. I would like to thank the board for taking a chance on me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we started talking about this. And those conversations, when you're a deputy superintendent, you think you know a lot of things. And when you're a superintendent, you realize you don't know a lot of things. And so I just want to thank you all for the last 3 years. It's been an amazing journey for me. I have learned more than I could have ever expected to, and I've established connections with each and every one of you. And I want to thank you all for your belief, your commitment to good work, and most of all for the love and compassion and the care that you give to all of our students. The pay that you get for this job is just the work that our kids are able to do, and the support that we can give to the staff in our school district so that this community's expectations can be met and exceeded. And I'm just so grateful for the hard work and dedication that you all have. So thank you very much.
Oh, smack my face into that. You guys have any comments or questions? Anything about the presentation?
No, but I just echo Jen's comments, and thank you, Steve. We've appreciated our time with you and wish you the best as you move to Bend. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. Thank you.
All right, moving on to then our next agenda item, something that always brings tears to our eyes. Just kidding. Assessment and student achievement. I didn't say if it was good tears or bad tears. I just said tears. All right, so did you want to introduce this or just let Dr. Nelson take it from
Go ahead
here?
for it, Mike. Let me grab my laser pointer here. Wow, that's a tough show to follow. I am also very, very fortunate to have been able to work with you, Dr. Cook, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to grow under your tutelage. This has been a remarkable year, and for 36 weeks, our students have been doing good work. The question is, of course, how good? And how can we look at the results of this year and really make any sort of judgment as to how our students have grown and will continue to grow? The presentation that we have here could literally also be 40, 50 slides. But there's a couple of caveats that I'd like to put in first. Caveat number one, many of our windows closed last Friday. And many of the results that we're seeing are fluctuating. They're changing day by day. But what we present to you tonight is a first glance. We will certainly be providing you more information broken down by subgroup, by slices of demographics along the way. But there's a lot of things that I think we can use in this presentation to really inform our work. And remember, our work does not start next school year. Our work has already begun. We're starting to take a look at how these results are impacting our decisions for summer, for staffing, for placements for this coming year. So we offer a variety of different spring assessments for you. And the very first one that we'll take a look at is our civics assessment. This is taken a majority by our secondary students who are being asked questions that are duplicates of the exam for citizenship and naturalization to our country. All students in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools are required to pass this in order to graduate. Right now, we are down to 3 students remaining. 3 graduates who we expect to commence this week have not yet passed this assessment. We continue to work with them, but we had 77 students finish this requirement during this window, as you can see presented up on the board. And in this particular case, we had over a 98% passage rate. This is no surprise to our students. We provide them ample material in the classroom, led by our dedicated teachers, and flashcards and other support materials along the way. Certainly, we're excited to see that, but we'd love to be able to get those last 3 marked off the list. All 3 of them are scheduled to take it tomorrow. Then we get into some other standardized assessments. Our first is iStation. iStation is norm referenced, meaning we're really trying to compare our students against a population around the nation. And it's measuring multiple domains in reading. So the results that I'm presenting to you this evening are in tiers. You can imagine them as a stoplight. A green tier, which means these students are pretty much good to go. The yellow, there's a little caution. There's something we need to do that's not quite there yet. And then these students in red. So in the population that we had from kindergarten, 67% of our kindergartners this year met their Tier 1 targets as directed by those national norms, those benchmark scores. 69% in first grade, 74% in second, and then staying across the mid-70s to the high 70s as of 5th grade. Our Tier 2 students, those students who we need to give a little bit more attention to, are more high of need in kindergarten and first grade, and then normally pare down. But look at our Tier 3 students. Almost always our students in Tier 3 are students who qualify for receiving special education services, which is about 10 to 11% of our overall student population. So that tracks fairly well. The question that you may also be asking is, well, what does this look like how do you compare to other years in a non-COVID year? So I have that data here for you to take a look at. The top 3 rows, kindergarten, first, second, and third, are bolded because that is part of the Idaho Reading Indicator. It's an annual assessment provided in the fall and in the spring. And if you look at it comparative to 2 years ago, the numbers are fairly consistent in kindergarten. 69% of our students were at Tier 1 2 years ago, 67% this year. But you definitely see a difference when you look at first grade, second grade, and third grade. Keep in mind this is non-cohort, so we're not looking at the same students over those 2 years. But if you wanted to kind of track that a little bit, the kindergartners in 2019 would be second graders this year. So we can compare that to here. These first graders are now third graders. These second graders are now fourth graders. So we definitely see some issues of things that we would like to see. And as the challenge of iStation gets more difficult every year, the test gets more complex, that students are being asked to do new things, we're also looking at, well, what is working? What is not working? And what are the things that we need to emphasize? So our team, informed by our building principals, have also given us some feedback. And I've put a kind of a modified SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats would be the normal T. We want to make it target. The first thing that we need to recognize is that we didn't see consistent growth. There was a lot of difference in what we were seeing. But if a student was tracking at the beginning of the year on grade level, they pretty much stayed consistent over the time. It was those students who were below grade level at the beginning of the year, who had a gap, that were growing slower. In the assessment itself, we saw that the domains of spelling and text fluency, their ability to read quickly through passage, was lower in these domains this year. So that's something we need to look on. So in taking those strengths and weaknesses, we are now developing our summer programs. So our summer programs will be focusing on those outreach. So when we notice that a student may be needing challenges, we are already geo-mapping those to neighborhoods and finding out where do we need to put our resources this summer to best suit those students' needs. How are we going to be able to get books in hands and provide services and check their understanding along the way? That's our target. Finding a way to continually provide mini check-ins with these students to make sure that they're on track or closer to that Tier 1 target or benchmark in the fall. Chair Brumley, with your permission, may I ask if there are any questions on any of the first 2 assessments?
No, I appreciate it being broken down.
Seeing only a few glazed eyes, okay. Let's move on to math. Mathematics, iReady Mathematics is what we use to progress monitor and benchmark our students in grades K through 8. Again, if we look at how our students are performing, remember we're on a gap because last year we did not provide the iReady assessment. So we're looking at the year 2019 to 2021. Non-cohort, our kindergartners actually performed better than they did 2 years ago. But keep in mind, this year's kindergartners are this year's second graders. So when we look at our potential cohort growth, there definitely are some gaps. Also wanted to inform you a little bit about why there are tildes over here. Our middle school principals were being very strategic with the ISAT assessments, and they wanted to push the ISAT back so far in to make sure that students' coverage of standards was as strong as it could be going into that assessment. In doing so, they had to make a tough choice because they're kind of both in the window. Even though the ISAT window is 3 months long, it conflicted with that. And when looking at that, they felt that the ISAT was the best option for them on that. In addition, we couldn't really extend the window because of state reporting requirements along the way. So what did we see here in our iReady data? I actually saw some very high growth in our elementary schools. Look at that growth over the course of the year. If a student came in kindergarten, they grew on average at 106% of the national norm. Our first graders grew at 129% of the national norm. So even though these students may have come in a little lower, They were exceeding national expectations. Our weaknesses were in the domains of numbers and operations and measurement and data. We also saw inconsistent growth in our middle schools. In looking at some of this, we really think that our Learning Acceleration Coordinator, the position is currently open. We hope to have that filled soon. This will be a point of focus for them over the course of the summer. And with your consideration later tonight, they'll be looking at new instructional materials, which should also help us fully have greater breadth of the standards. We also again see lower than expected growth in our middle schools, which may impact our future high school mathematics scores if we don't intervene.
Dr. Nelson, can I just clarify? So the middle school ISATs are just not in yet. They're going all the way up to the end of the window, so we'll get those when they are in. Did I interpret that?
Yes, let me clarify that. The scores that you see up here are for iReady. The math ISAT scores are in for our middle schools. They had to make a tough choice of whether they wanted to give iReady and ISAT at the end of the window, and they chose that the ISAT was more important for them to be able to do that. Okay. Thank you for the clarity. What do you think about moving forward into FastBridge? All right. We also, this year, moved from NWEA MAP into the FastBridge assessment. This is the first time that we've had an opportunity to benchmark middle school and high school English language arts. We tried it with the MAP assessment last year, and it just was not very successful. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of see how our students are growing over time. And I want to take this a little slower for you on this, just to be able to break it down and show you the types of things that we're looking at over the course of a year. First of all, let's take a look at reading. Again, this is a norm referenced assessment, so we're comparing our students to a national sample. Remember, that national sample was not probably taken during COVID. So this is a couple of years of data that we're comparing to this year's awkward year. The red line would be that target, that tier 1 goal that you would have over the course of the year as identified by the national norms. And this is how our students in grade 6 compared. The slides that we'll present to you, all you'll really need to do is take a look at how those blue bars are stacking up versus that red line. So here's 6th grade reading, 7th grade reading, 8th grade reading, grade 9, grade 10, junior year, and senior year. For the most part, we could probably say remarkably normal, again in a pandemic year. Let's take a look at the same assessment now in mathematics. Actually, let's hold on for just a second and talk about reading for a moment. In this particular case, we receive scores based on growth. And it's looking at how students are scoring, again, relative to national norms, compared to those peers that they would have nationally. In this case, over reading over the course of the year, we saw 76% of all of our students taking a reading over the course of the year showed typical or aggressive growth when compared to the fall. We also had 3 schools who maintained proficiencies over 80%. But that also meant that we had inconsistencies in those other schools that were ranging anywhere from the 50th to the 60th percentile in growth. This gives us an opportunity to find out how we're going to be able to individualize, to make sure that when a student takes an assessment that it means something to them, and it means something to the teacher, and it means something to the buildings. So those school learning plans that our buildings are drafting, a lot of that is going to be based off of this. In addition, we had about 20% of our students who had flat growth, meaning that over the course of the year, they really did not grow much. That's an area of concern that we need to address this next year. Now moving into math, same assessment, same type of look. Again, if we were taking a look at our national benchmark, that's the red line here in fall, winter, spring, and this is the relative scores of our students. Here's 8th grade math. Those are our students typically taking high school equivalent. 9th grade. 10th. Grade 11. Not including AP, not including dual credit. And grade 12. Again, not including AP or dual credit students. So again, remarkably normal in a COVID year. But we did see some things in here as well. And as we all know, math is an area of focus for us. The students who were taking Math 1 early greatly outperformed the national norm. They were in the 90th percentile. And 62% of our students met the aggressive growth targets, meaning that no matter what their score was in the fall, when compared to national norms and benchmarks, they were at least at the 80th percentile. But again, we saw 22% of our students at flat growth, and we saw inconsistent growth between our 3 high schools. This is going to give us an opportunity to look at what we're offering over the summer. Many of our extension courses this summer that will be offered to students talk about reinforcing mathematics. And that sign-up just went out this last week. And we'll also have a new focus on instructional learning, professional learning from our teachers, if you consider new instructional materials coming up this year, and a way to be able to reinforce the shifts necessary to continue our good work in math. But over all of that, the one that tends to be the star of the show is the ISAT. Again, results continue to come in. We have about 40 to 50 student scores who we have not yet received, so I would say we're very close in the percentages that I'll be showing you today. Almost always, we are compared to the state average. People want to know, how are we performing? So I have the current breakdowns here, hopefully in an easy way format for you. Red bar, state of Idaho. Blue bar, Coeur d'Alene Public Schools here for the 2021 school year. Again, when you compare by grade level, these first 2 bars would be for grade 3, English Language Arts Literacy. These bars, grade 4, grade 5. And you'll notice, especially in grades 4 and 5, we greatly outperform the state. Grade 6 is a little tighter. Grade 7, grade 8, grade 10. The final set of bars aggregates all of our students together in English Language Arts Literacy. And this year, our districts, on average, were 61% at level 3 or higher, where the state average currently sits at 54%. The last slide for you compares us in mathematics. Again, red bar, state of Idaho. Blue bar, Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. Tight in grade 3. Big difference in grades 4 and 5. But starting in our middle schools, we are outperforming in every grade level in 6, 7, 8, and 10, but by not as much of a margin. Overall, our district students in mathematics for the 2021 school year currently are at 44% at level 3 or higher, compared to a similar population at 42% in the state of Idaho. How does that compare over previous years? Well, again, grain of salt with that gap year in the middle. Here is our longitudinal proficiency over 4 school years. 2021 school year comparative to the 3 previous. Again, because we did not have an ISAT in 2020, you will have to add an additional year to be able to compare. So it wouldn't be as easy to go from here to here. You're going to have to go from 19, 2 years. So for example, in English Language Arts, our 4th graders 2 years ago were 60% proficient. Those students would be expected to be 6th graders this year, are now 54% proficient. Certainly in terms of overall proficiency, we are stronger in English Language Arts than we are in mathematics. But again, keep in mind at the 10th grade level, that is not a 10th grade assessment. That is an assessment of exit standards in grades 11 and 12. So overall, what do we see in our ISAT results so far? Well, for the second year in a row, we outperform in every grade level and subject area. But we definitely have some targets of improvement. We can break down our results to find out specifically what our students need to do a little bit better. Equivalent equations and expressions in mathematics. Writing, it's always astounding how many students' writing samples are ungraded because they wrote off topic. So we consistently will work on that. Grammar usage, capitalization, punctuation, spelling. The work that we're hoping to do this next year with MTSS practices and individualization will make a huge deal in that. And of course, we have also promised to you with the provision of the system performance plan that we will integrate a full data dashboard in the district to give us greater control over how our students are going and watch them more consistently. That's a lot, but we got a lot more coming in the coming weeks. We will be breaking things down for you. We'll have lots of information to share and to post on our district website, cdaschools.org, choose assessments. I'd love to stand for any questions that you have.
No questions for me tonight, Dr. Nelson, but thank you very much. Appreciate the information.
Pleasure.
I do have one question, maybe a request for next month too. As we look to a year from now, potentially reopening the e-school, this would be our first year of any sort of comparison there, just to see how do our e-school students do. As a whole, it would be interesting to see that as we launch into maybe the future of that and just understand. And thank you for all of this. It's it's a tremendous amount of.
Not a problem, Trustee Smith. I will have
thanks.
that. We will have all results for you by building. But again, we're waiting for those results to come in a little bit slower. But we definitely do disaggregate by our e-school. If we actually look at performance in iStation as well as in FastBridge, they're performing very well. But again, I will be more than glad to provide that here for you shortly.
Dr. Nelson, you mentioned you're going to be getting us more data. Would it be possible when we get the data to see it cohorted? I know we had a year off, so it'll be hard for the ISAT in particular, but it would be helpful to start looking at it through that lens, I think, especially as we're getting ready to make big decisions regarding our high school schedules. So it would be helpful for me at least.
Understood, and it's a goal as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nelson. All right, looks like the man of the hour, Mr. Voller, is up next on our Hayden Lake property.
Good evening, Chairman Brumley, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. I'm here tonight to talk to you and update you on the Hayden Lake School and the sale of that property, and it's been quite a journey over this last year, really. And if you recall, in April, we opened bids on the first go-around, and we received 2 bids that were both under the appraised value, so we weren't allowed to accept either of those bids. And so the board authorized us to go out for a second round of bids. We published and posted the required notices by the state of Idaho, and we opened those bids on Thursday, May 20th at the school district office. We received 2 bids. There's a summary in your packet. The high bid was received from Hayden Bible Fellowship Incorporated in the amount of $2,302,560. So at this point, we have a decision to make on how to proceed, how we want to move forward. So we can accept the highest bid and proceed with accepting that. We can reject the bids, or we can just discontinue the process. So it's the recommendation of administration that we, because these bids did exceed the value that the board set of $2 million for consideration, that we would move forward with accepting that bid. And this is a process similar to what we went through with the Hayden Lake School, that we have to do this in some steps. And so if you choose to select that process tonight, the first thing we have to do is to accept the appraisal. And so we did have an appraisal done in February, and that appraisal is on your desk. Chairman Brumley, you have a full copy of that. Members of the board, you guys have the executive summary of that appraisal. And if we choose to move forward with this, we do have to disclose the appraised value of the property, accept that in a motion, And then in a second motion, we can move forward with accepting the bids and allowing administration to move forward with the purchase and sale agreement. And then this will come back to the board for final approval with, in 30 days, once we get the closing papers and a resolution prepared for you guys for final approval. So if you have any questions, I can stand for those. Otherwise, we can hear your conversation and move forward with motions if you choose.
Thank you, Mr. Voller. I don't have any questions. I would just say that I would be in favor of moving forward and willing to make the motions when we're ready. Okay. So first I'll make a motion to accept the appraisal. So as required by Idaho Code, I move that the board enter the appraisal conducted by Valbridge Property Advisors dated February 17th, 2021 into the record of the Board of Trustees, thereby establishing the minimum value of the property at $1,920,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, then. I move that the board accept the high bid and authorize the superintendent to execute the purchase and sale agreement with the Hayden Bible Fellowship, Inc., the final terms of which will be subject to approval by the board in the form of an executed purchase and sale agreement, resolution, and final closing documents are prepared.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just real quick, I'd like to say on this one, it's kind of bittersweet on this, the selling of this building, having attended there. I did have a chance at the bid opening to speak with some members of the organization buying it, and it is their intent to keep the original school building and utilize that as office and do some additions to it down the road. And so I appreciate that historic value of that building is going to maintain in Hayden there. So.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Voller, for all of your work on this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Our next action item is collaboration, and I will let Dr. Cook introduce that.
I think, Dr. Orozco, are you tag teaming this?
Okay.
Seth was going to do it, but Seth's ill, so I think Kate is pinch hitting.
Seth's not really ill. Can you hear me, Seth? You received the information about collaboration and kind of, I think you've gotten that background information. I don't know if there were slides. I saw what you received. So I'm asking the booth in my obvious way. Okay, no, okay. So just to back up a little bit, the surveys that went out to families and students, we all know that overwhelmingly our folks had hoped for Fridays as the collaboration day. And we realized that there were a number of reasons why that probably would not be a wise decision. And we had second thoughts as a district. We talked about attendance at collaboration and attendance on Fridays and some of those, and some of the inconsistencies that would result if we were to have Friday afternoons, especially as collaboration days. So the board directed us to go back out with another survey and get some results. And you saw the results and it's on the screen, that essentially what we realized is that our folks really liked Monday mornings. Our families, I think there was something there was historically that seemed to work for many families, Monday mornings. Wednesday mornings, however, you see that with staff, Wednesday mornings this year seem to provide better collaboration for our folks. And we know that the board will direct us to decide, I think, between Monday mornings and Wednesday mornings. And it's a little tough, but we want to mention some things. Some of the discussion that we've had is that on Monday or on Wednesday mornings, there really are less interruptions because of holidays and those sorts of things. I think we determined there may be 6 days if we would have 6 additional collaboration days. We know that our team has gotten pretty used to Wednesdays as a collaboration day, that middle of the week time for teachers, as opposed to the beginning of the week when teachers are trying to get ready for the week. That just that more a sense of being able to focus more with the less pressure to be ready with copies and work and preparation. And I think one of the other things that I think our administrative team discussed together is probably an advantage of Wednesday mornings versus Monday mornings is just all of the schedule changes that potentially could happen next year anyway with shifts in schedules. It seems like this might be a way to keep some consistency between this year and next year. With that, I'm going to turn and look at the peanut gallery behind me and see if I've forgotten any of the conversation topics. Did I capture it all? Looks like I captured it all. So those were some of the thoughts that we were hoping you might consider as you make that decision about how to direct us for collaboration next year between Monday mornings and Wednesday mornings. Any thoughts or questions for me or our team? The hard ones will go to the team.
I'll just start with that. I heard from several parents of why did you guys dangle Friday out there if it wasn't really a viable option. So I think there was some frustration.
I think there's a lot of frustration. I think also from staff. I think everybody, it's one of those, I think, tough lessons learned that, I think the process itself we all experienced was let's put it out there, see what folks want, and then we scratched our heads and go, oh, we invited them to give us input on something that we realized later would be very difficult to really to carry through if we, depending on those Friday afternoons. One thing I think that, another thing I think we mentioned that I didn't just say is we realized that Friday afternoons, I think Seth might have mentioned that Friday afternoons, if we lose families because they're taking that day off, that really does affect, our enrollment count, our A&B. So
this was a couple of my thoughts, because obviously I look at this and I go, oh, you have parents and teachers on the opposite end of this. And so now you're having to essentially make a choice between parents and teachers. And so a couple of the comments that you brought up, Dr. Roscoe, I was sort of thinking in the opposite, in that while the teachers are thinking it's less loss of professional development having it on Wednesdays, I'm thinking it's less loss of class time.
Sure.
Because then, again, we're back to the Mondays, and then professional development is sort of what's getting compromised versus the class time. So just one of the things that struck me. And then the other one was, I know some of the emails we received from parents, or at least a couple of them commented about, or maybe it was even in the older comments, that kids really, particularly your secondary kids who already have to get up relatively early, and that may be changing. But the commentary was how nice it was Mondays for them to be able to have a little bit of extra sleep time after the weekend and all the activities of the weekend. So those are the two things that sort of I had been thinking about as I'm looking at this, and but I really don't have a good solution, or because it's so hard. You essentially are having to pick between parents and teachers, and I really don't like that.
Agreed. I don't think the survey brings that up really clearly, doesn't it? And I think I was asked just to remind. I think we've heard feedback for a lot of years about the difficulty of Monday mornings, teachers being in that mindset to prepare for the week and to actually be ready to really learn, take their learning on Monday and translate it into classroom practice. And I recognize that's one factor that you all are having to consider. But I did want to be able to represent that point of view, because we've heard it so long, so loudly from so many folks who really are dedicated to wanting to improve classroom instruction.
I see this as a classic case of be careful what you ask for, because we asked for this information, and the data is pretty clear, right? It's 2-to-1 staff in favor of Wednesdays versus 2-to-1 students and parents in favor of Mondays. I think when I look at this, and my concern I have with Wednesday and the feedback we've had from community members is that it just appears to be a bigger burden, particularly at elementary level, to cover Wednesdays for whatever reason. And maybe that's because it falls into people's middle of their work weeks, or maybe families with staggered work schedules or whatever. Monday's easier to juggle. I see the obstacles with Monday for staff as kind of our issues to own, and so I don't like picking between one or the other, but I think because of the burden of Wednesdays on families, I would support Mondays and doing what we've traditionally done. Historically, I'm still interested in Friday. I think there's, I would agree, we erred by dangling that out there, because I think there's probably more obstacles than there are opportunities with that one to be successful, but for collaboration purposes.
Yeah, just to echo, I mean, it's hard to be on this side of professional development that is so ingrained in what we're about to do and launch and be a key part, but to have asked the community, to have heard Friday, and then to ask and to hear Monday and not say Monday would be really a challenge and probably a disservice. And so, so I'd be in favor of Mondays.
Echo the similar comments. We've asked a lot of our parents this year through change in schedules, and we asked them this time, and I think they were very clear. And so I'm hopeful that we can, if we reevaluate this and we can find a way to make Friday work, it may prove to be more difficult, but it was clearly the most popular choice. But I think moving forward, we asked our families, and I think childcare surfaced as an obstacle for many of our families, and I don't know that we're prepared to provide a solution for that right now, and so I don't know that I'm comfortable burdening our parents further in the next school year.
Well, I'm willing to be, I would be willing to agree with the Monday mornings. I too, as Trustee Morser said though, and Trustee May alluded to, I'm very interested in us looking at the Fridays. When you have such an overwhelming response to that being what people think is best, it's not to say, we often do pilot programs and see how they go. So such an overwhelming response, and knowing that there has to be a commitment to that on both sides and making that work for kids and for teachers, I'd still like us to explore that.
I would agree with that.
There's no motion in here. Was this just,
There'd have to be one, I would.
I don't know.
We need action.
Okay, so I need a motion then, if someone wants to create one.
Okay, I'd move collaborations to Monday mornings. And late start for the 2021-2022 school year.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you, everyone. No, that's not a fun one. Next on our agenda is curriculum.
So we have two items for the board's approval tonight, secondary math resource adoption and expressive art. And I think we have Katie G, who we are so excited to see on screen. Great to see you again, Katie. And so she's here for questions if anybody has questions on this. We had some comments on, we put this curricula out for 30-day review and got some substantial comments on this one. And I think we even wrote a rebuttal to some of those comments that's in your board book there. And so Katie is here also if you'd like to have any follow-up or further questions.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cook. So there are two items before you this evening. The first is regarding expressive art. It went out for a 30-day review after its presentation to the board in May, and there were no comments there. So we're coming back asking you to please approve that. The second is regarding math resource adoption. We put that out for a 30-day review. We had 3 letters, which were in your board packet. One was from Chelsea Ferguson. She is the school psychologist located at Lake City High School. One was from independently from Matt Warner, who is a math teacher at Lake City High School. And then one was a combined letter from the Lake City High School math department, as well as 2 special education teachers. In brief, all of them made different points in different ways, but all of them pointed to their preference for the Envision resource over the Carnegie Learning resource. There were different points made. Some of them were pointing to special education and the need to make sure we have robust supports for special education. One was that this provides enough, that Envision provides enough of a depth of knowledge level 4, which is the deepest knowledge of level 4, but also provides more balance or more opportunities for for some of the procedural knowledge. One had to do with alignment of the curriculum that we had been writing with the adoption of resources. And one was a feeling about how teachers had been left out of the process and wanting to have more of a voice for all teachers. And there are more points that you can read in the packet, but that's a brief summary of them all. I provided some rebuttal points in the board memo, and I'm not so sure I'd like to call them rebuttal points as much as just kind of deepening the context. I stand ready to do whatever the board decides it wants to do, if it wants to move forward in adopting Carnegie, or if the board's will is to pause and re-examine these resources or appoint an ad hoc committee. But basically, this was a process that we had anticipated that would involve the marrying of the written curriculum with the actual resources that we adopt. So regardless of what resource we adopted, we anticipated that would happen, and that became part of our cycle of continuous improvement. And it is definitely important to consider the needs of our special ed population. That is absolutely critical, as it is critical that we consider the needs of each and every student. My understanding is that districts that have adopted Carnegie have been feeling that it has done a good job of supporting students in special education through the personalization of the Mathia program, which is part of the solution. And then to the point that that Envision provides enough depth of knowledge for, that's probably where we have within the secondary math committee a little bit more dissension. A lot of the people who support Carnegie the Carnegie program feel that it provides more opportunities to do rich math tasks and allows for teacher creativity to shine through in the implementation of the curriculum rather than having to create those deep depth of knowledge for math tasks. I'm not going to stand before you and say that Carnegie is a perfect product, and I can't stand before you and say that Envision is a terrible product. Both have received high marks from Ed Reports. Carnegie did receive slightly a higher mark from Ed Reports, but in the long run, it's a lot about what can do what can align the best with our philosophy, our instructional framework, our portrait of a graduate outcomes, and all of those things that we've been working very hard to try to implement in the district. So in my view, the resource that does that the best is Carnegie. But again, I stand ready to do whatever the board would like moving forward.
Katie, I have a general question. I appreciate your memo. I think reading this, and the process that you used was thorough and, was intended to come to us with a recommendation. We are not math experts, and so I don't believe it's our job to sit up here and decide which resource is best suited for curriculum that you guys have been working on now for, 3, 4, 5 years. So for me, the process, I'm frustrated that we're sitting here tonight, in the very last minute with one school that seems very frustrated by the resource that was recommended last month. And so my question to you would be, if CHS was here and they thought that we were going to switch up and we were going to now approve Envision, what would they be saying? Because clearly we've got dissent or, two departments that have for the last several years been operating very differently and maybe haven't been collaborating. And is this a symptom of that? I'm not sure. But, I felt as though last week we had a good presentation from you, we had good feedback, and then sitting here this month, or I should say last month, we're at a different place. And so it's hard to discern whether this is just a math department that's going in a different direction or wants something different than what the whole has been, or if the resource just isn't suitable. And it's hard to figure out which is which. I read the reviews, and it seemed like Carnegie was rated higher and it had better feedback. But then again, those are just reviews, and we're not the source experts on this. So I just wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on that, a little bit more about the process, and when these concerns kind of percolated, is Lake City going to be able to work with Carnegie if that's what's approved? That's the real question I have, because it's vitally important that everybody get behind the resources chosen tonight. We had some issues with big ideas. We've been through this before, and this choice needs to be right for both high schools. So I want to make sure that whatever we decide, that it's going to work for both schools.
Thank you very much, Trustee May. In regard to the process, what happened was every teacher, a math teacher at Lake City High School was invited to be part of this process. I attended a math department meeting asking them to be part of this process, and let them know what we would be doing this year. I sent out emails to the people who'd been part of Secondary Math Academy, letting them know that this was going to be part of our work for this year. We offered $2,000 stipends. I reached out to administrators, asking for more representation. And in the end, 2 teachers from Lake City High School chose to be part of this process. This process was different from previous adoptions, which I had not been part of. We rewrote part of the board policies and procedures so that we would make sure that teachers could have a voice in this process, but also that if the ones who would be making the decisions were the ones who had been involved in the professional development all along. So, for example, we had a day of vendors presentations that every Secondary Math Academy teacher attended. We had a lot of professional development around the portrait of a graduate. We had professional development around the teaching framework and the instructional framework. And through all of that, in that process, the teachers who were involved gained a deeper understanding of the types of learning that will be needed in order to produce the portrait of a graduate outcomes that we are hoping for. And so through this process, we involved all teacher input in round 1 of voting, just to narrow down our choices. So any teacher who wanted to was allowed to participate in the first round, and then I wrote a report based on that information and shared it with the people in the secondary math academy, so they had an opportunity to read and see what their peers were saying. But in the end, in the second round of voting, I only gave those who had been involved in the secondary math academy the final vote, which I had explained last time. And regardless of the resource chosen, we're going to need to do some pretty intensive professional development for all teachers throughout the year to ensure that it's working well. But in terms of buy-in for next year, I can't answer that with certainty. It would be my great hope that we could coalesce, and that has been my goal all this time with the Secondary Math Academy, is that we're not one high school versus another high school, but that we are a district of teachers who teach math, and we align with our vision for the kinds of outcomes that we want for our students in math, and we work collaboratively across highway lines in order to do that. And it's my hope that we can still, regardless of whatever choice is made, that we can still accomplish and achieve that.
Thank you for giving that description of the process, because I do think that's an important piece. I remember when members of this board discussed the policy around resource adoption, and it was really the hope that we would improve the process and get buy-in from all of our staff, and so we wouldn't end up with situations like this. So I am disappointed that staff had the opportunity to participate and receive a stipend, and we didn't have better turnout so we could have two schools working together, like you said, to select one resource. For me personally, your recommendation means a lot, and I think the process for me seems like it did allow input from both high schools. It was a long process, and so for me tonight, I support your recommendation, and I hope the next time we make this important of adoption that we get both schools or all schools involved to come to a singular recommendation, because I think it is important. We're not two different math departments. We're one high school math department, and we need to work together maybe a little bit more closely.
I would agree with Trustee May's comments. I think it's important that we recognize the work that the Secondary Math Academy folks have done. This is my 6th year on the board, and I think we've talked about secondary math all 6 years, particularly high school, knowing that we have some data that we weren't happy with, and knowing that we needed to improve what we were doing to improve student outcomes. And I think there's no one has a better understanding of that than those folks who are on the Secondary Math Academy, of where we are and where we need to go. And so I'm going to support the process and support their recommendation, or I would be in support of the process and the recommendation for this.
One of the key things I heard you say, Katie, was that that the Math Academy had opportunity to speak with folks, see presentations that not all of those that weren't involved in that academy were privy to. And I give that weight in that information is important in that selection process. And so it's hard to have individuals who weren't 100% involved in that process to consider to have them outweigh the recommendations in addition to your recommendation for what would be best for kids moving forward.
And I appreciate the opportunities that you provided both high schools in trying to get as many people as possible to be a part of the Math Academy. So thank you for your work on this, and thank you for trying to reach out, recognizing that and seeing that and trying to get more people involved. So thank you for your work in this whole process. It has been, goodness, I don't know how many. Did you say how many years? It's been at least.
I think it started before you and I were on the board, so I know we've talked about it for 6 years in a row.
Yeah, so
in one regard or another.
thank you to you and your team.
Katie, I appreciate the model that you set forth to draw so many voices in, and I really think it's a model that you can build on with the next adoption of curriculum. And I know that you, having learned through this process, you'll be able to expand it and grow it and strengthen it for the next curriculum adoption that we need to do. And so I appreciate the recommendation that you put forth and your entire team. So thank you, and I'm excited for the implementation for our next students. So.
Okay, I'll make the motions, Chair Brumley, if we're ready. Okay. So I'll make a motion to adopt the McGraw-Hill illustrative math for 6th through 8th with the advanced 6th and 8th grade text to support ALP and the IXL licenses to support personalized instruction and procedural knowledge for all students.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, looks like we have another motion.
Yep, I'll make a motion to adopt the Carnegie integrated with Mathia for the integrated math 1 through 3.
Second.
There's another one.
What's next?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Are we going to discuss, or we just need a motion for the next one? I'll motion to approve the expressive art course proposal as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. That's okay. All right, so we are on to system performance framework, and I think we just have sort of a...
Mic's available if you guys have questions, but we'd ask for your approval.
Okay. Does anybody have questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the system performance framework as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. System performance framework. Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Thank you, Dr. Cook, for those presentations last month. Okay, and now we are on to policies for action. I know we saw these last month.
If Chair Brumley, if I may,
Yes.
We actually started with one policy and wound up with more based upon feedback and edits that we received, and we've got Megan O'Dowd on Zoom ready to answer questions. And what the resulting proposal was quite a modification as to the original intent, and we would ask for approval on all of these policies now that give us that kind of that general tenor that we were seeking on standards of conduct. And I'll let Megan clarify if she has anything she'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cook, members of the board. I think the policy explanations explain what we did. There were some comments and cleanup that we tried to do. It looks a lot different, but in reality, it's not. It's really, we just pulled out comments that were embedded into the original draft and pulled them out as separate potential policies. We thought that was cleaner. So now there would be a proposed confidentiality, conflicts of interest, and public gifts donation. So that's specific to the 5270, and I'll stand for questions if the board has any.
My question isn't on the revisions, it's more of a procedural aspect, Megan, because we've sort of taken the comments and morphed into a new policy that hasn't necessarily been out for comment. Would it be appropriate to have this out for 30 days of comment in light of the significant change, or is it unnecessary?
Yeah, I think, Chair Bromley, I think that's a great question, and we discussed that a bit. I think 5270 is still appropriate for approval. It's normal to go through edits during the comment period. That is what has happened. So if the board was prepared to adopt that one today, that has properly gone through our procedure. Although I think that the public has already seen the confidentiality proposed amendment and the conflict of interest, because they are being proposed as standalone policies. I do think that the board could certainly leave those open for comment for 30 days if it so chooses. Again, those are not new. They just look differently tonight for the board.
Anybody else have comment or questions? I think my preference would be that we adopt 5270 and 5270P, but we would leave 5271 and 5272 for another 30 days for comment from folks, just to make sure.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'll make a motion to approve 5270 and 5270P as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And so is it agreed we will leave 5271 and 5272 for action next month? Okay. All right.
There's I think one more policy, right?
Yeah, there's two more. Yeah, there's.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch there. I was just breaking those down, but the others. Did you have anything more, Dr. Cook or Megan, on the 4500s and the 9000?
So the 4,500 is just simple modifications to 4,500 that precipitated out of the discussions of the changes in 5270. And so it would likely fit, if you wish, to add 4,500 to 5271 and 5272 at this point, if you want to set on those. And then the section 9000s, there's several there that we would ask for approval on tonight, if at all possible.
So
My automatic lights just turned off. Bear with me. Sorry, guys.
given the discussion we had last month on these policies and the fact that they've been out for review for the last 30 days, I would make a motion to approve the section 9000 policies as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. That leaves just the 4,500 that we haven't discussed. And I
think Dr. Cook was saying we need that 4,500, I believe, falls under the kind of the same parameters of 5271 and 72. So I think you were suggesting that we bring that back, all three of those next week.
I would suggest all three of those come back next month for 30-day review.
Okay. I was going to say that I thought that it just moved the green section. And is the red new from last month even, or is the red what was part of last month? That's what I thought all the red was what we had last month. And they just moved the green section. So I thought it was all there last month. But if not, then I agree with pushing it out.
I don't know exactly how to answer that question. I can tell you that essentially what we've done are very similar steps on all three of those, which is just some tweaking of language that really, the discussion on 5270 is what caused us to make those modifications. So kind of if it's good for one, it's kind of good for all. That's all. And I don't think I guess what we're discussing is whether or not they're substantial enough to sit on for 30 more days. And I think there's not one bit of harm to let them do that if you guys are open to that.
Okay, then if everybody's good, leaving 4,500 also. Okay. All right, then that is our last action item for the evening. Now we're just into superintendent's information, drawing 3 new course proposal.
We're back to Katie Groutman. Thank you, Megan.
Good evening again, Chair Brumley, and Vice Chair Smith, and esteemed trustees and Superintendent Cook and Clerk Lynn Town. I am just bringing before you drawing 3. It's a new course proposal. I'm bringing it forward for a 30-day review. It was written by Megan Spencer Artis, an art instructor from Lake City High School. And it would extend opportunities for students who have previously taken Drawing 1 and Drawing 2. The complete packet or the complete curriculum is in the board packet, and I will stand for any questions.
Katie, I just had a general question. We approved an additional art course tonight that was out for 30-day review. So are these just more courses being offered, or do they discontinue other courses in lieu of these? Does that make sense? Because I'm just curious, is there enough students, or how does that work when we add more courses? I'm guessing if you build it, they will come, but is this sort of the same thing where this is replacing a course, or is this an additional course?
My understanding is that they are not planning on offering this to students until semester 2, but they wanted it written. Lake City High School was hoping to have it written and available as an offering to students well in advance of semester 2, so that if students chose to take it, then they could. My understanding is that this would not be in place of, or that this would be in addition to courses that are already being offered, and that it might just expand offerings for students. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. I figured it was
trustee?
probably a continuation class of a student that maybe had taken Drawing 1 or Drawing 2, but I was just kind of curious how that worked in general, so thank you.
It is, Trustee May. They have to have had passing grades in Drawing 1 and 2. Mm-hmm.
I have just 2 questions. I know the form's a little different, but I think we used to have kind of a deadline for doing these sorts of things. Do we still do that, or has that changed?
That changed after the curriculum audit, and to be honest, Trustee Marshrow, I was wanting to make it more set in stone this year prior to COVID. That had been my original plan. But with COVID and everybody's attention needing to be more on the immediate, I haven't implemented any guidelines in terms of when we would have approval, but that's my hope for the future.
And then second question was just regarding a resource for this book. Is there a required resource?
In terms of this course, there is no book required with it. It's using, so the curriculum is written within the resources are within the curriculum, and so there are links out to various resources that the teacher would use rather than have a book that goes along with it.
All right. Any other questions for Katie? All right. I guess we'll have it go out for comment and see it back next month. Thank you, Katie. Long-range planning, year-end reports.
This is an exciting day for us, and Don is ready to step up, and I think Scott's going to also co-facilitate and help Don and Jeff as well. So excited for this. We just had elections at our last long-range planning meeting, and Don is now the what do we call this? The chair in the past chair. The past chair. So Don is officially the past chair, and this is his first act as officially the past chair.
Yeah.
How's that? I thought I was using my teacher voice. That didn't work? Okay, so we assembled a subcommittee consisting of 8 long-range planning members to examine the recommendations which the committee presented to you a year ago. Yeah, I thought last year would be spent supplementing that plan, and it turns out we're just sort of reviewing it. What a crazy year. So we met twice in March and May to discuss the recommendations and propose the updates you have in your packet. The full long-range plan committee then voted unanimously to adopt these recommendations at our final meeting of the year on May 17th.
Good evening, everyone. And just a few of the issues that we took into consideration during our meetings. First, the big unknown of enrollment coming back next year, next fall. Those projections remain fluid. The timing of our projects will in large part depend on where we're at for the 21-22 school year. So that made it really challenging. We just wanted to acknowledge that is kind of a huge concern and a challenge. Also, what's going on with the housing market, with the ongoing construction growth, migration into our community, bringing a lot of families in, the growth that we referenced earlier this evening during Dr. Cook's presentation on the north and west ends of our district really seems to continue unabated, and that's another major consideration in the work that we did this year. We talked about the potential acquisition of sites for 2 schools, the new middle school site and the elementary site on the west side. So that definitely was a new positive factor in the committee's discussion this year, where we didn't have that last year. And then we just want to also acknowledge that even though this year with enrollment down, the portables weren't in use to the extent that they are now, that we still anticipate those portables to be in use in the coming year. We have 26 portable classrooms still located at 5 schools in our district. So it's of course your stated goal and our hope that over time we can move away from our reliance on those.
And those portables specifically, really, we're going to see that stress on the west side of the district. And this slide reiterates a couple times actually what we've talked about today, so I'll be really brief with it. But the immediate priority and the recommendation is that we continue to work to secure the land on the west side of the district through the talks that we've had with the Cortair Development, or also called the Lakeside Development Corporation. You'll hear a couple different terms thrown out of who that company actually is, because they have several different names that they go under. And the sale of the soccer fields behind Hayden Meadows, and then finalizing the sale of the Hayden Lake School will certainly help put us in a position to go back to the table and have conversations with that developer on how we can finalize and secure up those properties. So those will be some next steps coming as soon as we close on this final property. So we'll be reporting to you in the very near future on next steps for that.
Jeff, can you remind me where our 40 acres are at on that map?
Yeah, it's almost just straight north of the top star that you would see. Well, just a little bit north end of Prairie Avenue. So if you just keep in a straight line going north, just north of Prairie Avenue and Hutter right there, it would be almost just right at the very top line of that screen. Does that make sense? Can you picture that?
Above Prairie or below Prairie?
Above Prairie.
Above Prairie. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's see, our middle schools remain at capacity or over capacity, especially at Woodland, which continues to rely on portable classrooms. We also expect to see continued growth pressure in grades 6 through 8 over the next few years. The incoming 6th grade class has 100 more students than the current class. Therefore, we believe the next school district should plan for as a 4th middle school This will allow the district to ease overall middle school crowding and accommodate anticipated growth at these grade levels. Fulfill anticipated need for another middle school to serve families on the fast-growing west side of the school district. Modify our middle school attendance zone to better serve a school feeder system with 2 middle schools feeding into each high school, and reduce our reliance on portable classrooms. Voila, thank you. With the drop in elementary enrollment this year, we could see those numbers start climbing quickly again in the coming year or two. It's difficult to know how soon we will be back to the elementary enrollment we had 1 year ago. We do know, however, that the community growth is continuing to bring us new families with school-age children. We don't see that slowing down anytime soon. At some point in the next few years, we could again find ourselves in need of a new elementary school. We believe this will be needed in the west and northwest areas of the district when the bulk of the new housing is going on. A new elementary school would accommodate the anticipated growth, ease capacity pressure in existing schools, keep classroom sizes in line with district goals, and allow the district to decommission portable classrooms such as at Atlas, Skyway, Hayden, Meadows, and Ramsey schools.
In the phase 1 recommendation, and Dr. Cook alluded to this as well, the need for addressing our deferred maintenance. And in phase 1, our plan is to continue to address it through the current maintenance budget because there currently isn't an existing funding source available to reach out to start to tackle the full $17 million in deferred maintenance that we have. But in doing so, we can start to work on some of the critical projects. We'll use metrics such as the safety assessment that we've been talking about to identify some critical needs, as well as large components that could shut down a building. Unfortunately, some of those are very large ticket items, and so we have to be really careful. It's kind of an act to determine what can we do with the funding that we have. You know, when we look at a couple $1 million HVAC projects versus some rooftop units that we have that may be more in a $30,000 range that are probably a little more affordable in a budget that we have available to us. But we'll continue to do the best we can to address those critical needs, identify those, and work through those with the budgets that we currently have available. Also in the phase 1 is consideration for the developmental preschool and the K-12 magnet school. 2 years ago, we signed a lease at the early learning with the Lutheran Church of the Master, and we're able to consolidate the early learning center to all be in one place. This has been a great facility for them. However, they are quickly outgrowing that facility. We expect that program to continue to grow over the next few years. It'd be nice to find a long-term solution for them, ideally on a district-owned facility. While this lease has been great for us and keeps them all in one spot together, we need to start looking at what would that look like for next steps to consider a true home for them that's a little bit larger and will really support their needs for those young learners. And then also with the K-12 magnet school, and this recommendation has changed a little bit with the recent guidance that we're going to take this year to further plan the K-12 magnet school, but it does also mean that we still need a home for that school, and so consideration for that. And again, I think the ideal solution would be that we find something on existing property. Maybe that might mean building on a portion of ground available on one of our existing properties. And we would also explore some lease options as well for that until we can put together a full plan for what that would fully look like. And then in phase 2, the recommendation is to find that funding source for deferred maintenance so that we can really start to tackle that $17 million. And so as we look ahead at bond projects, as we look at new middle schools, as we look at a new elementary school, we should consider a strategy for funding that deferred maintenance as well. I think the preference would be to do that through an SPFL, but we would also look at some bond counsel as well as we look at those recommendations coming into next year as we move forward, looking at those funding mechanisms and sources available for that. That's it.
So the committee didn't really anticipate needing to make any changes from last year's proposal in terms of what we are thinking might be necessary down the road in this 10-year plan. Again, so many uncertainties and unknowns through the past year. We left this alone. So phase 3 still mentions an anticipated need for yet another new elementary school as we see the growth continue. It's just not entirely known at this point when that might need to happen. Same thing with expanding our high school capacity, although we're starting to see some numbers now that I think might make the committee want to revisit the priority level of what's happening with our high school. We're just starting to see some new enrollment projections for next year that might make things a little tighter at that high school level earlier than we're thinking at this point. So, we narrowly looked at and considered updating the recommendations from last year's plan. That's you'll remember this plan is over 100 pages long from last year. We did not do a thorough update of all the data in the plan, but we would anticipate that as things potentially start to stabilize with our enrollment and get back to normal next year, that the committee could take up some of these other data points that we had in our original plan. And so we cited a few of those there for you tonight that we might consider looking at again as we move forward. And that is our presentation. We have 3 of us here to answer your questions.
I'd just like to thank you for your work. I know it was kind of a difficult year to work in committee group and to keep that going, so I appreciate what you're able to accomplish. One thing that you gentlemen talked about there, and I think it's something that as a district we need to probe a little deeper, is there a change in our enrollment? And it appears to me that we're seeing growth, and somewhat significant growth at the secondary level and not so much at the elementary level. And I know there's some speculation, I've heard speculation, that is that tied to our changing real estate market, and that because the way prices have escalated, we're having more established families with older children move in versus young families, because young families it's difficult to live in Coeur d'Alene currently. And so I think that's something we need to probe as a district and probably as a long-range planning committee, because that could have a tremendous impact on what we thought 2 years ago when this plan was developed. Obviously, we know the need at middle school, but hearing the numbers at a high school and what Dawn just referred at 6th grade, I believe at Woodland, having the large class, that we could be in trouble in the near future at our high schools. So.
Agreed. I think we do need to reconsider some of our assumptions when we went into this process roughly 2 years ago with the more recent trends that we're seeing with the housing market and the prices in our community.
I think just to kind of echo what Trustee Morrisroe said, I know on long-range planning about 4 years ago, maybe even 5 now, we did see a big bubble of 4th, 5th graders, and is that the cohort that we're now seeing, in our middle schools moving into high school? So I would be really interested to see, is this just a temporary bubble that will eventually move its way through, or is this the long-term trend? And I think this will be the year, maybe not towards the end of the year, to really start, crunching some new numbers and seeing what growth looks like. Is this just a one-time, late middle school, early high school bubble, or is it going to continue on that plan? Because I think it would change the recommendations, because I think the thought was for elementary school sooner rather than later, but I think the thought is it some sort of middle school, small high school? What does it look like, but what are the long-term implications of that growth?
Yeah, I completely agree with your points on that. And I think, as we move into next year, I think it probably likely would be worthwhile spending some money to hire a couple consulting companies. We have a couple resources that we've used in the past. We did part of that with Flow Analytics. We've used some other companies in the past as well, but I think it'd be worth revisiting that and likely probably investing some money to really understand what these changes are going on in the community and how that's going to impact us so that we can really clearly guide our recommendations moving forward.
I'd just like to say thanks to Dawn and to the rest of the whole committee for your leadership this year and leading us through. I mean, we all met by Zoom the whole year, and so a lot of people showed up on the regular monthly basis to make that happen. And And the same things that we were just discussing here were discussed, as concerns for the future as well. So appreciate all the work.
And I would just like to say thank you to Trustee Smith for her time on long range plan and for being the liaison for the board. So thank you for your time in that as well. And same with you, Dawn and Jeff and Scott. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we need to wake up Miss Nichols so she can come up here and present on the next topic. I know you weren't really sleeping, Dr. Nichols. But it's a long night, so.
It sure is. I'll be quick. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. We are catching up with our high school alignment work, and I am pleased to present to you our current status and where we're headed into the fall. So let's see. Okay. So we now have 3 schedules that we want to share for focused feedback. I'll review those 3 schedules and kind of give some context around that. And review our focused feedback process. We're really looking forward to an opportunity to formalize a schedule proposal in the fall based on a pretty comprehensive feedback process with our community, also taking place in the fall. So you are familiar with this schedule. It is a 7-period modified block. This is one of the options we would like to present to our community for some feedback and insight. And the second option is an 8-period AB block. The one that we want to present for focus feedback is an anchored block day. So there's every A day is the same, every B day is the same. So it's not a rotation on the AB block. However, each week there is an extra day, and so we have a rotating A week, B week. So this is considered an anchored 8-period AB block. And then the third option is our 6-period traditional. So what we have here are 2 schools who are really proud of the schedules that they have, and they think it can execute the goals that we have, and would like to present that to our community, and to really dig into what those 2 options are in addition to a 7-period day, and the best possible outcomes. This was presented not as is, so the conflict that was suggested around the 6-period days, we just don't have enough elective options. And so our representatives from Coeur d'Alene in our schedule committee said, well, if we actually had a few more FTE that were really focused on some elective opportunities and pathways, we could provide pretty robust elective options, particularly with the revision of our school graduation requirements. And so they would like to present this for focused feedback with all of that context in mind. So these are the 3 options that we're hoping to present out to the public, and I want to give you a little bit of context about how we hope to accomplish that. First of all, the majority of this work is feedback and information. So it's a comprehensive structure that is not a selling feature. We're not trying to sell or convince, or it's just here's an overview and some real thoughtful consideration and collaboration with our stakeholders around these options. We're hoping to do an informational video on each schedule. That's a consistent video that all people will see, so they get the same messaging, the same access to resource, the same overviews, and then from that we can have an opportunity for Q&A sessions, and we're hoping to maximize opportunities when we already have so many of our families and students together at like open houses, and then we'll also host some specific stakeholder focus groups, specifically with our teachers, focus groups with parents, community partners, and then we also want to have student focus groups, and we're really looking forward to more significant collaboration with our student advisory group and getting some insight and detail from them, and hopefully facilitated by them, right? Students speak much better to each other than we do. So
we're looking forward to that opportunity and leadership. And then after we have real comprehensive information and understanding, then we would like to provide a survey to our stakeholders and to give us some insight and specific feedback on schedules that really surface for them. And then from all of that, we hope to establish a proposal for the board. And so here's kind of where we're thinking in our timeline. We're going to come back together as a committee in August and develop the tight schedule and process for our focus feedback. And a lot of that will take place in late August and early September with our regularly scheduled in-person events. And then we're going to come together. We have a retreat. It's on our calendars. We're going. We're going to spend the day together on September 22nd. And we're really going to sit through and analyze and walk through all of the feedback and understandings that we have from our stakeholders. And then we'll establish a proposal from there. We'll give that comprehensive review to our board so that you guys can see all of the considerations and everything that we had available to us for our considerations. And then we will present a formal proposal to you in our October board meeting. And we feel like we have to have that presented in our October board meeting in order for us to have this decision in time to adequately engage in professional development and planning for the 2022-23 school year. So that's where we are. Any questions?
Is that for action at October?
Yep.
No, in October. I was saying, is that for action in October? Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the update. Seems like a step backwards, but whatever.
Yep. It's where we are. I think we're authentically there. Everybody's on board, and we'll see what. There's a lots to be considered, so we'll see where it takes us, particularly from our feedback.
And I would just like to speak for the committee and all the staff that's working on the committee. I think they are committed to this timeline, and it's been a process. And I think you're right that there's two schools that are very passionate about the work that they're doing. And so I think that moving forward, there is commitment to them bringing a proposal forward, and that's an integral step. I think 4 months ago, I didn't hear that kind of conversation. So I feel optimistic that this timeline's reasonable and realistic, and I look forward to the continued work that they will do. So thank you, too, for your leadership.
Thanks.
I would just like to at least, I don't know if I want to put him on the spot, but I would just like to recognize that we have a student here that potentially could be impacted by this schedule. And at the very least, if he's not ready to talk about this tonight, I think it would be wise to have him be in a position to talk about this in the very near future, because this is exactly the kind of issue and topic that SAG should be leaning in very, very heavily on. So Austin, there's your cannonball across your bow. Be ready to opine and give some feedback as the board continues this heavy lift. Now, if you want to, if you feel like you can talk about it.
Austin's been to quite a few of the meetings, actually. Austin was at at least 3 since we started, and then Ainsley was at the last one. So it's been nice to have kind of both of them there and present and giving feedback. So thank you, Austin.
Nope. You want to come up here? Come up and stand. Stretch it out.
I'm sure that we have 3 very positive schedules. You know, everyone has their opinions about it. I'm sure we'll have a unified opinion by October. But I just want to say that no matter what, I think that it's very important that you've committed to having all of these, both high schools on the same schedule. I think that's very important. Regardless of what schedule it is, as long as they're on the same schedule, I think that'll be incredible. And beyond that, I probably can't say much more until the next board meeting.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Nichols, for your presentation today, and again for a lot of hard work in the last 6 weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as well to your committee. and to Trustee Pickford and Trustee May for stepping in and sitting in on those. So thank you. Okay, getting close. Trustee zone equalization timeline. And oh, I was like, where did Lynn go? But she's over there ready. All right, Ms. Town.
Didn't want to be caught off guard this time. If you recall, last month I reported to you about the 2021 report of the census and what boards of trustees in Idaho are required to do by statute, which is to equalize the population in each zone in the district. So since that time, I've received some additional information that the census data is estimated to be released in the fall, but no earlier than July 31st. So if it's released on July 31st, we have 120 days to do the work. That puts us to the end of November. Absentee ballots for the November election start mailing in September. The State Board of Education then has 60 days after the 120 days to review the plans and approve them. That puts us well into January. So because the census data is delayed, the Secretary of State has confirmed that it will not impact the November elections. Those elections will be run under the zones that currently exist. So there's a couple of this could happen points that we need to make. So what occurs if two trustees end up in one zone because of new zone lines? If that occurs, the law states that the longest serving member retains the seat. The board then would appoint a new member in the zone that does not have anyone in it. And that appointment would be done just as appointments are done now. The second potential thing that could come up is if a new board member is elected in November and then ends up in a zone that has two trustees when the new maps are drawn. The trustee with the most tenure would retain the seat. So that could mean that a newly elected board member might lose his or her seat within that zone. Just a possibility. So hopefully
Any
that answers
questions?
everyone's questions. We've contracted with ISBA and another company to do this work for us. And I'm just waiting for them to get started. As soon as they tell us, we'll get done what we need to get done.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I know we asked you for some more specific information last board meeting, so thank you very much for putting that together and bringing that to us
You're welcome.
this month. Any questions, comments?
Lynn, do they actually come with, I assume, proposals, and then we must have to approve those zones? Is that correct?
Yes, we will review the proposals that they put forward to us, but the company does the initial work, and they eventually will rewrite the legal descriptions, but they will present us with options for what those new zone lines could look like, and then we sign off on those.
How long has it been since they reevaluated our zones? That might give us some idea of. 10 years. 10 years, yeah. Did they reevaluate them 10 years ago and no changes were made?
10 years ago, we made changes.
We did make changes.
Yes, and we did it in-house, and I worked with Tom Hobson at the time, and we did all the work. It was quite a process. It was a lot of fun, learned a lot. I never want to write another legal description as long as I live. But we did change, I think every zone changed to some degree. Some changed obviously more than others. I think Zone 5 stayed very close to the same. It maybe moved 2 blocks. Zones 2 and 3 did make some significant moves, but yes, there were changes to every zone 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and our last information item is policies 3010, open enrollment, and I'm going to guess that's Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. This is, as requested, we made some modifications. We talked about this quite a bit, and we made some modifications to this policy. I think you'll see that the red line version of this policy actually changes 2 words, and we believe that those 2 words will accurately capture the desired intent that we were seeking to achieve. We're glad to push that out and get some public feedback on that, but we believe that actually those 2 words might make all the difference we need. So just would like the board's consideration on that.
I'm going to be quick because I'm losing it a little bit at 8:30 here after 4 hours. But really, to me, there's 2 words in this that I have issue with, and it's in the sentence, although not guaranteed and subject to space and priority considerations outlined in the policy procedure, the district will endeavor to honor. And I would prefer to see endeavor to struck, so it would say the district will honor a high school student's desire to complete all grades at that student's high school of choice.
We're bound by statute. That gives us a little bit of challenge. I think we're trying to push as hard as we can against that statute that says we have to open enrollment has to be a consideration annually by law.
Is that what it says? I thought it said that by law you have to apply annually.
We will throw this back to legal.
I mean, it says Idaho Code 33-1402 requires annual application.
Glad to send it back to legal. Yeah, no, you're fine. Yeah.
So, just to me, it leaves too much ambiguity, and I think we've seen it this year. There's just different interpretations of that, and it's, I don't know.
Okay.
I would prefer just be real concrete if possible.
Okay, we'll make sure we.
And that's just my preference. I don't know.
I worry as our high schools continue to get more crowded, most likely in the next 2 to 4 years, this is going to become more of an issue. So I would be curious what legal does say about the statute. If we're able to honor that, I think for high school, it's imperative because asking a high schooler to move back to a school they already transferred from is very difficult. So I would be in favor of, if we're able to, because of state statute, honor that in policy. That would be my preference.
We will be glad to push them on that.
Okay, hearing nothing else. We got a few things coming up this week, everybody. These aren't on here, but I'll mention we do have honors breakfasts on Thursday and Friday for Coeur d'Alene High School and Lake City High School, and then graduation for Venture on Thursday evening, Coeur d'Alene High School graduation on Friday evening, and Lake City High School graduation on Saturday morning. And that's just the fun stuff. And then we get to come back for budget on Monday, June 14th, and budget on Monday, June 21st. So put it on your calendars. And I believe, Mr. Morrisroe,
yeah.
you will be absent.
Yes, just wanted to remind you all, if I hadn't already, I'm going to be traveling and will not be here for the 14th or the 21st.
Nor will I. I'm potentially able to Zoom in or call in, potentially.
Okay, well, work with.
Unless you want to join.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, I just want to say again, thank you, a very heartfelt thank you to Dr. Cook and all of his service. I know this is your last board meeting, and appreciate everything you've done. And with that, we will adjourn. Thanks.